Memory disguises itself as truth. Humanity may have inherited magnificent illusions instead of origins. Impossible relics linger like silent accusations, mocking every confident explanation ever written. Each forgotten trace presses against reason, inviting obsession rather than understanding. Continue carefully. The next revelation refuses every comfortable belief you still possess. On a quiet rise above the gentle landscape of Minorca, the Talayot de Torelló stands with a silence that feels almost deliberate. Massive limestone blocks, weathered by countless seasons, rise into a broad circular tower whose rough surfaces still hold the marks of ancient hands. Wild grasses sway around its base, while the Mediterranean wind moves through the surrounding fields with a rhythm that has changed little over thousands of years. At first glance, it appears to be little more than a monument built from stone. Yet, the longer one remains, the more the structure seems to resist simple explanation, inviting careful observation instead of quick conclusions. The Talayot de Torelló belongs to the Talayotic culture, a Bronze and Iron Age society that flourished across Minorca and neighboring Majorca between roughly 1000 BC and the arrival of Roman influence centuries later. Throughout the islands, similar towers rise from hillsides and plains, forming one of the Mediterranean's most distinctive prehistoric landscapes. Although many have suffered the effects of erosion, agriculture, and time, Torelló remains among the better preserved examples, offering an unusually clear glimpse into a civilization that left no written language to explain its achievements. Excavations suggest that the surrounding settlement was once a thriving community. Homes, defensive walls, storage areas, and ceremonial spaces gradually emerged beneath layers of soil, revealing that the tower did not stand alone. It formed part of a carefully organized settlement, whose inhabitants understood architecture, engineering, and the careful use of local materials. The enormous stones were positioned without mortar, relying instead on precise balance and remarkable craftsmanship. Even today, the stability of the construction raises quiet admiration. Why were these towers built? The most widely accepted explanations point toward several practical purposes. Their elevated positions could have allowed inhabitants to monitor nearby territory or communicate with neighboring settlements through smoke or fire. Others suggest they served as communal gathering places, symbols of social authority, or defensive strongholds during periods of conflict. None of these ideas fully contradicts the others. In fact, the tower may have fulfilled different roles over generations as society itself evolved. Yet, certain details encourage deeper reflection. The effort required to transport and position stones weighing several tons would have demanded extraordinary cooperation. Such projects required planning, leadership, and shared purpose. What belief inspired an entire community to dedicate such labor? Was survival alone enough to justify these monumental constructions, or did the stones express something less tangible? Identity, memory, or reverence? Researchers have also noted that many Talayotic monuments occupy commanding positions within the landscape. Some appear visually connected across considerable distances, creating networks that stretch over the island. Whether this arrangement reflects defense, communication, territorial organization, or symbolic geography remains an active topic of discussion. Without written records, every interpretation rests upon fragments of evidence carefully assembled from excavation, environmental study, and comparison with other prehistoric cultures. Beyond archaeological investigation lies another layer of interpretation, one shaped by local tradition and modern speculation. Some visitors have wondered whether towers like Torelló possessed astronomical significance. Certain alignments observed at other prehistoric sites throughout Europe have inspired comparisons, leading a few independent researchers to ask whether the builders tracked seasonal events, celestial cycles, or significant moments marked by the rising and setting of particular stars. At Torelló itself, however, no scholarly consensus confirms such intentional astronomical design. The possibility remains intriguing but unproven. Others have proposed that the tower functioned as a ceremonial center, where rituals connected communities with ancestors or unseen spiritual forces. The immense scale of the monument, combined with its commanding presence, certainly encourages such interpretations. Ancient societies often blurred distinctions between political authority, religious practice, and daily life. If ceremonies once unfolded within sight of these stones, no surviving voice remains to describe them. More speculative theories venture even further, suggesting that the Talayodic monuments preserve knowledge inherited from civilizations now lost to time, or represent echoes of cultural exchanges extending far beyond what conventional archaeology presently documents. These ideas frequently emerge because the precision and endurance of the structures inspire genuine wonder. Yet, direct evidence supporting such claims has not been discovered. The stones themselves remain silent, offering neither confirmation nor denial. Perhaps that silence explains why places like the Talayot de Torelló continue to fascinate. Every excavation uncovers new artifacts while exposing fresh uncertainties. Every measured stone answers one question only to introduce another. Standing before its weathered walls, surrounded by the same horizon known to its builders thousands of years ago, one cannot escape the feeling that the monument still guards a portion of its original meaning. Whether future discoveries will finally reveal that hidden purpose, or merely deepen the mystery, remains an open question carried quietly by the wind across the ancient stones. If monuments like the Talayot de Torelló remind us how much meaning can disappear while stone survives, then the next site carries that mystery even further. Here, the silence is not only preserved in weathered walls, but sealed beneath the earth itself, where darkness has protected questions for thousands of years. On the rugged coastline of Anglesey in Wales, overlooking the restless waters of the Irish Sea, Barclodiad y Gawres rests beneath a grassy mound that seems almost ordinary from a distance. The wind moves across the headland without interruption, carrying the scent of salt and the distant sound of waves striking ancient rock. Yet, beneath this quiet landscape lies one of Britain's most remarkable prehistoric monuments, a chambered tomb whose hidden interior has challenged understanding for generations. Its Welsh name translates as the Giantess's Apronful, a title rooted in local folklore rather than archaeology. Like many ancient monuments across Europe, the tomb became woven into stories long after its original builders had vanished. Legends transformed forgotten engineers into giants, mythical figures whose impossible strength seemed the only explanation for such enormous stones. Whether these tales preserve faint echoes of genuine memory or simply reflect humanity's instinct to explain the extraordinary remains uncertain. Archaeological evidence places the construction of Barclodiad y Gawres around 3000 BC during the Neolithic period. This was an age when farming communities gradually reshaped both the landscape and their relationship with the dead. Built from immense slabs of local stone, the monument originally formed a long passage leading into a series of interconnected chambers. Although parts of the structure have collapsed over time, careful excavations have revealed a surprisingly sophisticated design beneath the mound. The tomb was never intended as a simple burial place. Excavations uncovered cremated human remains, fragments of pottery, polished stone tools, and traces of ritual activity, suggesting repeated visits across many generations. The monument appears to have served not merely as a resting place for the deceased, but as a location where memory, ceremony, and community became inseparable. One discovery, however, distinguishes Barclodiad y Gawres from many similar sites throughout Britain. Several stones inside the chambers bear carefully carved patterns: spirals, zigzags, chevrons, diamonds, and winding lines etched into their surfaces thousands of years ago. These designs possess no accompanying written explanation. They remain among the oldest surviving examples of prehistoric rock art in Britain, their creators leaving behind symbols instead of language. What did these carvings represent? Some archaeologists interpret them as ceremonial decoration, perhaps marking sacred space or expressing beliefs connected to death and renewal. Others suggest they formed symbolic maps, recording journeys both physical and spiritual. Similar geometric motifs appear in Neolithic monuments across Ireland and Western Europe, hinting at cultural traditions shared across surprisingly wide distances. Yet, symbols have a curious ability to invite interpretations beyond their original purpose. To some independent researchers, the repeating spirals resemble astronomical cycles or observations of celestial movement. They wonder whether the carvings encoded knowledge of lunar phases, seasonal changes, or constellations important to agricultural life. While prehistoric communities certainly observed the skies, no definitive evidence confirms that the artwork at Barclodiad y Gawres functioned as an astronomical record. The resemblance remains intriguing but unresolved. Others focus instead on the monument's orientation. The entrance aligns broadly toward the northeast, leading a few researchers to investigate possible relationships with sunrise during particular times of year. Such alignments are well documented at several prehistoric monuments throughout Britain and Ireland, though determining whether every orientation reflects deliberate design or practical construction remains a careful challenge for archaeologists. Inside the chambers, another mystery quietly persists. The enclosed spaces produce unusual acoustics, allowing voices to echo in unexpected ways. Even soft sounds seem to linger among the stone surfaces before fading into silence. Was this simply an accidental consequence of architecture, or did the builders understand how enclosed spaces could influence ritual experience? Without written testimony, certainty remains beyond reach. Modern technology has answered many questions about the tomb's age, construction, and contents. Radiocarbon dating, geological analysis, and digital recording have all expanded understanding of the monument. Yet, the central mystery has hardly changed. Science can identify pigments, measure stone, and reconstruct collapsed walls, but it cannot fully recover the thoughts of those who carved abstract symbols into rock 5,000 years ago. Perhaps that is why Barclodiad y Gawres continues to inspire both careful scholarship and quiet imagination. Every visitor enters a space shaped by hands whose beliefs disappeared long before recorded history began. The carvings remain exactly where they were placed, unchanged through millennia, still inviting interpretation without offering certainty. Standing within those ancient chambers, surrounded by symbols that have outlived countless civilizations, one cannot help but wonder whether they were intended to communicate with future generations, or whether we are searching for meanings that were never meant to be understood outside the world that created them. Spaces could influence ritual experience. Without written testimony, certainty remains beyond reach. If the carved stones of Barclodiad y Gawres leave us wondering whether symbols can preserve forgotten ideas, our journey now shifts to a landscape where the mystery is written not only in stone, but in geography itself. Here, two neighboring hills have watched kingdoms rise, empires fade, and countless stories gather around their silent slopes. Their greatest secret may not be what has been discovered, but what remains concealed beneath the earth. East of the Jordan River, where rolling valleys gradually give way to rugged highlands, two prominent hills rise above the surrounding countryside. Together they are known as Tulul adh-Dhahab, a name often translated as the Hills of Gold. From a distance they appear almost symmetrical, standing like ancient sentinels overlooking the valley below. Their golden appearance during sunrise and sunset has long inspired both admiration and imagination, while their commanding position naturally draws attention from anyone crossing the landscape. For thousands of years, this region occupied a strategic crossroads linking Arabia, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean world. Traders, travelers, soldiers, and pilgrims all passed nearby, carrying goods, beliefs, and stories between civilizations. Such locations rarely remain untouched by history, and Tulul adh-Dhahab is no exception. Archaeological investigations have revealed that both hills preserve evidence of repeated occupation stretching across many centuries. Defensive walls, monumental architecture, pottery, and structural remains indicate that substantial settlements once flourished here. Layers of construction suggest that later inhabitants repeatedly built upon the foundations left by earlier generations, gradually transforming the hills into immense archaeological archives. Among scholars, Tulul adh-Dhahab is perhaps best known because many researchers identify the site with the ancient city of Mahanaim, a place mentioned in several biblical narratives. According to these traditions, Mahanaim served at different times as a royal refuge, a military center, and a location associated with significant political events. The exact identification remains a subject of scholarly discussion, but numerous archaeologists consider the evidence compelling enough to continue investigating the connection. Yet, written traditions, valuable as they are, leave many questions unanswered. The hills themselves reveal a remarkably complex sequence of occupations extending through the Bronze Age, Iron Age, Hellenistic period, Roman era, and beyond. Every generation altered the landscape, leaving behind fragments that often overlap in confusing ways. Walls disappear beneath later buildings. Roads shift direction. Sacred spaces are replaced, reused, or abandoned. Rather than presenting a single historical moment, Tulul adh-Dhahab resembles an immense manuscript written repeatedly over thousands of years, with earlier chapters only partially visible beneath later editions. This complexity makes interpretation unusually difficult. Archaeologists carefully compare pottery styles, construction techniques, and radiocarbon evidence to establish reliable chronologies. Each excavation answers certain questions while introducing entirely new uncertainties. Even when a structure is uncovered intact, determining its precise function often proves challenging. Was it a palace, an administrative center, a temple, or a fortified residence? Stone alone rarely provides complete answers. The twin hills themselves have also encouraged speculation. Why were two neighboring elevations occupied instead of one? Some researchers argue that each hill served distinct administrative or defensive purposes within the same settlement. Others suggest that occupation shifted gradually between the hills over different historical periods as political circumstances evolved. The archaeological evidence supports multiple possibilities without decisively confirming any single explanation. As often happens with ancient places whose histories remain incomplete, more speculative ideas have also emerged. Some independent researchers have wondered whether the unusual pairing of the hills held symbolic importance beyond practical settlement planning. Across many ancient cultures, elevated places carried spiritual significance, serving as locations where heaven and earth were believed to meet. Could the twin summits have represented complementary sacred spaces, each fulfilling separate ceremonial roles now lost to memory? No direct archaeological evidence confirms such interpretations. Nevertheless, the recurring association between hills, temples, and ritual landscapes throughout the ancient Near East encourages continued discussion among historians and archaeologists alike. Others focus on the region's long-standing legends concerning hidden treasures. The very name, the Hills of Gold, naturally inspires stories of buried wealth concealed during periods of invasion or political upheaval. Local traditions have, for generations, spoken of chambers, precious metals, and forgotten caches resting beneath the slopes. Similar legends surround many archaeological sites, often growing richer with each passing century. Despite occasional discoveries of valuable artifacts in the broader region, no evidence has confirmed the existence of legendary treasure beneath Tulul adh-Dhahab itself. Still, the persistence of such stories reflects something deeper than simple hopes of riches. Ancient landscapes often become repositories for collective memory, where historical events gradually merge with folklore until separating one from the other becomes nearly impossible. Modern excavation has introduced technologies unimaginable to earlier explorers. Ground surveys, satellite imagery, geophysical mapping, and increasingly precise dating techniques now allow researchers to investigate buried structures with remarkable accuracy before excavation even begins. Yet, even these methods reveal only fragments. Vast portions of both hills remain unexplored, protected beneath accumulated layers of earth that have preserved their contents for centuries. Every excavation trench uncovers another sequence of walls, floors, storage vessels, and discarded objects. Each discovery expands understanding while simultaneously exposing fresh gaps in the historical record. It becomes increasingly clear that Tulul adh-Dhahab was never defined by a single civilization or one dramatic moment. Instead, it evolved continuously, shaped by countless lives whose individual stories have almost entirely vanished. Standing atop one of the hills today, overlooking the surrounding valleys as generations before once did, it is easy to understand why this place attracted settlement again and again. The landscape feels timeless, yet every stone beneath one's feet belongs to a different chapter of human experience. Somewhere below, untouched layers may still preserve answers capable of reshaping current understanding, or perhaps they will reveal entirely new mysteries that no existing theory has anticipated. For now, the Twin Hills continue their quiet watch, keeping whatever remains hidden beneath them with remarkable patience, as though waiting for the right questions to be asked before offering even a fragment of the truth. If Tulul adh-Dhahab reminds us that entire chapters of history can remain hidden beneath layered hills, the next destination shifts our attention to a place where the silence feels even older. Here, the ruins do not dominate the landscape from a distance. Instead, they emerge gradually from dark volcanic stone, as though the earth itself has chosen to preserve their secrets beneath an almost timeless horizon. In the basalt plains of northern Jordan, surrounded by rolling fields of black volcanic rock, lies Khirbet ez-Zeraqon. At first glance, the site appears almost indistinguishable from the rugged terrain around it. Walls built from dark basalt blend naturally into the landscape, making the ruins seem less like something constructed by human hands and more like an extension of the ancient ground itself. Only with careful observation does the outline of an extraordinary settlement begin to reveal itself. Unlike many famous archaeological sites that were occupied for thousands of years, Khirbet ez-Zeraqon represents a far more specific moment in time. Archaeological evidence indicates that it flourished during the early Bronze Age, beginning around 2700 BC. For several centuries, it stood as one of the largest fortified cities in the region before eventually being abandoned. That relatively brief lifespan makes its story especially intriguing because its rise and decline occurred within a remarkably concentrated period of history. Excavations have uncovered massive defensive walls, carefully planned streets, residential districts, gateways, and public structures that point to a highly organized urban community. The scale of construction suggests sophisticated leadership and an impressive ability to coordinate labor. Building with dense basalt presented unique challenges compared to softer limestone used elsewhere, yet the inhabitants adapted remarkably well, producing durable architecture that has survived thousands of years of weathering. The city's location was hardly accidental. Positioned near important routes linking settlements throughout the Levant, Khirbet ez-Zeraqon occupied a landscape where commerce, agriculture, and regional interaction could flourish. Pottery recovered from the site indicates contact with neighboring communities, suggesting that the settlement participated in wider economic networks extending far beyond its immediate surroundings. Yet, despite its apparent prosperity, something changed. By approximately 2300 BC, much of the city had been abandoned. The once active streets fell silent, buildings gradually collapsed, and nature slowly reclaimed the carefully planned settlement. Unlike cities destroyed by dramatic conquest, Khirbet ez-Zeraqon offers no universally accepted explanation for its decline. Instead, archaeologists continue to evaluate several possibilities, each supported by fragments of evidence, but none providing a complete picture. Environmental pressures represent one of the leading explanations. Shifts in regional climate may have reduced agricultural productivity, making it increasingly difficult to sustain a large urban population. Water availability, always essential in ancient societies, may have become less predictable over time. Combined with changing trade patterns or political instability, such environmental stress could gradually have encouraged inhabitants to relocate elsewhere. Other researchers point toward broader transformations occurring throughout the early Bronze Age across the region. Numerous settlements experienced disruption during this period, suggesting that Khirbet ez-Zeraqon formed part of a much larger pattern rather than an isolated event. Economic systems can collapse slowly, just as alliances between neighboring communities can dissolve without leaving dramatic traces in the archaeological record. Still, the remarkable preservation of the site encourages deeper questions. Walking through the basalt streets today, one gains the impression that the city was built with extraordinary confidence. Its fortifications, gates, and carefully organized layout speak of permanence rather than uncertainty. Why would a community capable of constructing such an ambitious settlement abandon it only a few centuries later? Without written records from the inhabitants themselves, every explanation remains incomplete. This uncertainty has naturally inspired more speculative interpretations. Some independent researchers have wondered whether Khirbet ez-Zeraqon belonged to an even larger network of early Bronze Age cities whose political relationships remain poorly understood. Could decisions made hundreds of kilometers away have influenced the city's fate? Others have proposed that the settlement possessed ceremonial or astronomical significance beyond its defensive and economic functions, although archaeological evidence has yet to confirm such ideas. The extensive basalt architecture has also attracted attention because of its unusual durability. Certain walls remain standing after more than 4,000 years, preserving streets and building foundations with remarkable clarity. To some observers, the city's survival appears almost unnatural, as though time itself has moved more slowly here than elsewhere. While geology offers a practical explanation, the exceptional resilience of basalt, the visual effect continues to inspire quiet fascination. Modern archaeological techniques have expanded understanding of Khirbet ez-Zeraqon through aerial surveys, environmental analysis, and detailed excavation. Each season adds new pieces to the puzzle, revealing additional buildings, refining dates, and improving knowledge of daily life within the settlement. Yet, the most important questions remain strikingly familiar. Who truly governed this city? What beliefs shaped the people who lived behind its imposing walls? And what final decision persuaded an entire community to leave such an impressive place behind? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not why Khirbet ez-Zeraqon existed, but why so much of its story disappeared while its stone endured. The basalt walls continued to stand in quiet defiance of time, holding memories that archaeology can only partially recover. Somewhere beneath the untouched layers that still lie buried, there may be evidence capable of transforming our understanding, or perhaps only new fragments that deepen the silence, leaving future generations to wonder what this forgotten city is still waiting to reveal. If Khirbet ez-Zeraqon leaves us contemplating how an entire city can fade while its walls remain, the next destination carries that thought into a very different landscape. Far from the volcanic plains of the Near East, another network of ancient stone enclosures rises across the hills of East Africa, where memory survives through architecture more than written history. Near the shores of Lake Victoria in southwestern Kenya, hidden among rolling grasslands and scattered trees, stands Thimlich Ohinga. At first glance, it resembles a maze built from enormous stones. Thick, dry stone walls curve across the landscape in broad circles, enclosing open spaces that seem both protective and ceremonial. There is no mortar binding the stones together. Instead, each block has been carefully positioned so that gravity alone has held the structure together for centuries. The result is a monument that feels remarkably alive, quietly resisting both time and explanation. The name Thimlich Ohinga comes from the Doluo language and is commonly understood to mean frightening, dense forest, or large, frightening enclosure, reflecting memories preserved long after the site's original builders had disappeared. Even before archaeology began examining the ruins, local traditions recognized the place as ancient, significant, and somehow different from the surrounding landscape. Unlike many prehistoric monuments discussed throughout history, Thimlich Ohinga belongs to a comparatively recent period. Archaeological evidence indicates that the earliest phases of construction began around the 15th century, although the broader tradition of building stone enclosures in this region may extend even further back. For several centuries, the settlement evolved as walls were expanded, modified, and repaired by successive generations. Excavations have revealed a complex settlement rather than a single isolated enclosure. Multiple concentric walls, narrow passageways, livestock areas, domestic spaces, and evidence of long-term occupation suggest a thriving community carefully adapted to its environment. Pottery, ironworking remains, animal bones, and household artifacts all point toward an active society engaged in agriculture, herding, craftsmanship, and regional trade. The engineering itself commands attention. Some walls reach heights of more than 4 meters while maintaining impressive stability without mortar. Builders selected stones of varying sizes and carefully interlocked them, creating structures capable of withstanding centuries of weather and seasonal change. The precision of the construction reflects accumulated knowledge passed through generations rather than spontaneous experimentation. The most widely accepted explanation for these enclosures is practical. During periods of regional competition and population movement, fortified settlements provided security for families, livestock, and valuable resources. The winding entrances limited direct access, making defensive strategies more effective while allowing communities to monitor visitors entering the complex. Yet, practical explanations do not necessarily tell the entire story. Why were the enclosures built with such monumental care? Why invest enormous labor into walls that often exceeded what simple defense might require? The arrangement of the spaces suggests that daily life unfolded within carefully organized boundaries, whose purpose may have extended beyond protection alone. Researchers have noted that Thimlich Ohinga belongs to a much wider tradition of dry stone architecture found across parts of East Africa. Although each site possesses its own characteristics, together, they hint at shared building knowledge circulating among communities over many generations. This raises larger questions about communication, cultural exchange, and technological development within regions that were once incorrectly assumed to have lacked sophisticated architectural traditions. Without extensive written records from the builders themselves, however, interpretation remains cautious. Some independent researchers have suggested that the circular layout reflects symbolic ideas about community, ancestry, or cosmology rather than purely military concerns. Across many cultures, circles often represent continuity, protection, or cycles of life. Could the design of Thimlich Ohinga have expressed beliefs as much as defensive strategy? Archaeological evidence neither confirms nor excludes such possibilities. Others have wondered whether the monument occupied an important ceremonial role during seasonal gatherings or political negotiations between neighboring groups. The spacious interior and carefully controlled entrances might have accommodated assemblies where decisions affecting entire communities were made. Although direct evidence remains limited, such interpretations continue to be explored alongside more conventional archaeological explanations. One particularly intriguing aspect of the site lies in what is absent. There are no monumental inscriptions celebrating rulers. No carved reliefs describe victories or dynasties. No written chronicles explain who first envisioned these remarkable walls. Instead, the monument preserves a history built almost entirely from stone, pottery, and oral tradition. The silence left by missing texts forces archaeology to rely upon material evidence alone, creating a narrative that is necessarily incomplete. Modern conservation efforts have helped preserve Thimlich Ohinga as one of Africa's most significant archaeological landscapes. Detailed mapping, excavation, and architectural studies continue to reveal new information about construction techniques and patterns of occupation. Even so, large portions of its social and cultural history remain beyond complete recovery. Standing within the winding stone passages today, surrounded by walls assembled with extraordinary patience centuries ago, it becomes difficult not to reflect upon how many remarkable civilizations have flourished outside the boundaries of familiar historical narratives. Every carefully balanced stone speaks of knowledge, cooperation, and purpose, yet the deeper motivations behind the monument remain only partially understood. Perhaps that is the enduring power of Thimlich Ohinga. It reminds us that history is not measured solely by surviving documents, but also by landscapes that continue to guard the memories of those who shaped them. And somewhere within those silent circles of stone, there may still be stories waiting for the right discovery or the right question to bring them back into the light. If the silent stone circles of Thimlich Ohinga remind us that remarkable civilizations can flourish beyond the reach of written history, our journey now moves farther south, to a place where an isolated sandstone hill rises above rivers that have connected cultures for centuries. Here, power, trade, and mystery converged in ways that continue to challenge long-held assumptions about Africa's ancient past. Mapungubwe Hill rises abruptly from the landscape near the meeting point of the Limpopo and Shashe rivers, in what is now northern South Africa. From a distance, the hill appears almost detached from the surrounding plains, its steep sandstone cliffs giving it the appearance of a natural fortress. Ancient baobab trees stand nearby, their massive trunks silently witnessing the passage of countless generations. As sunlight shifts across the rock, the hill seems to change character, sometimes welcoming, sometimes remote, as though carefully guarding the memories preserved upon its summit. Reaching the top is not easy. Narrow paths wind upward through the stone, gradually separating visitors from the world below. The climb itself creates a sense of transition, leaving behind the open landscape in exchange for an elevated place that once stood at the heart of a powerful kingdom. Even before archaeology uncovered its secrets, the hill carried an atmosphere of quiet significance. Between approximately AD 1220 and 1290, Mapungubwe became the center of one of southern Africa's earliest known kingdoms. Archaeological excavations have revealed a highly organized society with clear social hierarchy, specialized craftsmanship, long-distance trade, and remarkable political development. At a time when many outside observers once assumed that complex state societies had not emerged in this part of Africa, Mapungubwe quietly challenged those assumptions through the evidence buried beneath its soil. The settlement below the hill housed much of the population, while the summit appears to have been reserved for an elite ruling class. This separation between rulers and ordinary inhabitants represents one of the earliest known examples of class distinction expressed through landscape in southern Africa. Stone walls, carefully arranged living areas, and restricted access suggest that authority was not only exercised but physically elevated above everyday life. Among the site's most celebrated discoveries was a small golden rhinoceros, crafted from thin sheets of hammered gold wrapped around a carved wooden core. Although modest in size, the artifact has become an enduring symbol of the kingdom's sophistication. Alongside gold ornaments, archaeologists uncovered glass beads from Asia, imported ceramics from China, and other luxury goods that testify to extensive trade networks reaching across the Indian Ocean. These objects demonstrate that Mapungubwe participated in a connected world, exchanging ivory, gold, and other valuable resources with distant societies thousands of kilometers away. Yet, despite its prosperity, the kingdom's dominance proved remarkably brief. By the late 13th century, the settlement was largely abandoned. Leadership and population gradually shifted elsewhere, particularly toward the emerging center of Great Zimbabwe. Why this transition occurred remains a subject of continuing research. Environmental change provides one widely accepted explanation. Variations in rainfall may have affected agriculture and grazing, making the surrounding region less capable of supporting a growing population. Other scholars point to evolving trade routes that redirected economic activity toward more favorable locations. Political transformation may also have played an important role, with power gradually consolidating around new regional centers. None of these explanations fully excludes the others. Ancient societies rarely decline because of a single event. More often, environmental pressures, economic adjustments, and political decisions combine over decades, leaving archaeologists to reconstruct complex processes from scattered fragments. Still, certain aspects of Mapungubwe continue to inspire deeper reflection. The hill itself possesses an unmistakable sense of separation. Its elevated summit, difficult access, and restricted occupation naturally encourage questions about symbolism as much as governance. Did height itself represent authority? Was the summit viewed merely as a secure residence, or did it carry spiritual significance that reinforced royal power? Many archaeologists believe political leadership and religious authority were closely connected at Mapungubwe, as they were in numerous early kingdoms around the world. Rulers may have occupied the summit not simply because it was defensible, but because elevation reinforced their unique position within society. Yet, the precise beliefs surrounding the hill remain beyond complete recovery. More speculative interpretations have occasionally suggested that the remarkable location was deliberately chosen because of perceived natural energies, celestial observations, or sacred geography. Others have proposed that oral traditions preserve distant echoes of rituals once performed upon the summit. While such ideas remain difficult to verify through archaeology, they illustrate how places possessing unusual landscapes often accumulate layers of interpretation across generations. What remains undeniable is the remarkable sophistication of the civilization that flourished here. For much of modern history, the significance of Mapungubwe was underestimated, in part because prevailing assumptions failed to anticipate such a highly organized kingdom in southern Africa during this period. Continued archaeological research has steadily transformed that understanding, revealing a society whose achievements deserve recognition on their own terms. Yet, even today, many questions linger among the sandstone cliffs. How were royal decisions made? What ceremonies unfolded atop the hill beyond the view of ordinary people? What conversations accompanied the final departure from a place that had once stood at the center of a thriving kingdom? Standing on the summit as the rivers wind quietly across the plains below, it becomes clear that Mapungubwe Hill is more than an archaeological site. It is a reminder that entire chapters of human history can remain hidden in plain sight, waiting patiently beneath layers of earth, tradition, and forgotten memory. And perhaps somewhere beneath those sandstone ledges, or within stories that have yet to be fully understood, another piece of its remarkable past still waits to be uncovered. If Mapungubwe Hill reveals how power can rise from the landscape and disappear into silence, the next monument takes us to a colder and more isolated world, where stone itself appears to have been designed around time, darkness, and the movement of the heavens. Far from the southern plains of Africa, on a windswept island at the edge of the Atlantic, another ancient structure waits beneath the earth, carrying secrets that have survived thousands of years. On the island of mainland Orkney in Scotland, surrounded by green fields and distant ocean, lies Maeshowe. From the surface, it appears almost modest, a low, grassy mound resting quietly in the landscape. There are no towering walls, no dramatic towers reaching toward the sky. Instead, its mystery is hidden beneath the earth. Within this simple mound lies one of the finest examples of Neolithic chambered tomb architecture in Europe, a carefully engineered space where stone, darkness, and sunlight were brought together with remarkable precision. Constructed around 2800 BC, Maeshowe was built by communities who lived in Orkney long before written records existed. These people created some of the most impressive monuments of prehistoric Britain, including nearby stone circles, settlements, and ceremonial landscapes. Their tools were simple compared to later technologies, yet the scale and accuracy of their construction reveal a society capable of extraordinary planning. The entrance passage of Maeshowe extends deep into the mound, leading toward a central chamber surrounded by smaller side cells. Massive slabs of stone form the interior, some weighing several tons. Moving and placing such enormous blocks would have required careful organization, cooperation, and knowledge of engineering techniques that remain impressive even today. But perhaps the most remarkable feature of Maeshowe is not its size. It is its relationship with the sun. Each year, around the winter solstice, when daylight reaches its shortest point, sunlight enters through the narrow entrance passage and illuminates the inner chamber. This alignment suggests that the builders intentionally connected the monument with seasonal cycles. In a world where survival depended heavily on understanding the changing patterns of nature, such a relationship between architecture and the heavens may have carried deep meaning. What exactly did that moment represent? Some researchers believe the solstice alignment reflected beliefs about renewal, the return of light, or connections between the living and the dead. The chambered tomb may have been a place where ancestors remained symbolically present, linked to the rhythms of the natural world. The arrival of sunlight into the darkness could have represented transformation, memory, or the continuation of life beyond physical existence. Yet, Maeshowe does not reveal its purpose completely. Unlike later civilizations, the builders left no written explanation of their beliefs. There are no inscriptions describing rituals, no records naming those buried within, and no surviving accounts explaining why this particular location was chosen. Archaeology can reconstruct construction methods and cultural context, but the inner thoughts of the people who created Maeshowe remain unreachable. Centuries later, the monument received a second chapter of mystery. In the 12th century AD, Norse visitors entered the ancient chamber and left behind hundreds of runic inscriptions carved into the stone walls. These markings include names, messages, and references to historical events, transforming Maeshowe into one of the largest collections of Viking runes outside Scandinavia. Some inscriptions are ordinary expressions left by travelers, while others mention treasure, hidden valuables, and the mysterious atmosphere of the underground chamber. The contrast is striking. A Neolithic monument created thousands of years earlier became a place of fascination for a completely different culture. The Vikings, unable to know exactly why Maeshowe had been built, responded in their own way, leaving marks that became another layer of unanswered history. This later activity has encouraged further speculation. Some independent researchers have suggested that Maeshowe's astronomical alignment indicates knowledge far beyond what is commonly attributed to Neolithic communities. Others have wondered whether the monument served purposes connected to forgotten ceremonies, celestial observation, or complex spiritual traditions. While the builders clearly understood seasonal movements, there is currently no evidence proving that Maeshowe functioned as an advanced observatory or carried meanings beyond its ritual and funerary roles. Still, the precision of the structure continues to inspire curiosity. How did people thousands of years ago conceive such a carefully aligned underground monument? What experiences took place inside the chamber when sunlight reached the hidden stones? Were these moments witnessed by entire communities, or were they reserved for a select few who understood the deeper significance of the design? Modern archaeology has revealed much about Maeshowe, from its construction date to its relationship with other Neolithic sites across Orkney. Yet, the monument remains partly beyond explanation. Its stones preserve evidence of human intention, but they do not reveal every thought behind that intention. Standing beside the grassy mound today, with the Atlantic wind moving across the surrounding fields, Maeshowe feels less like a forgotten grave and more like a message carefully placed into the landscape. A message written not with words, but with stone, shadow, and sunlight. And perhaps the greatest mystery is not what the builders knew, but how much of that knowledge disappeared when their voices faded into time. If Maeshowe reveals how ancient builders transformed darkness into a place of connection with the sky, the next monument continues that conversation between earth, stone, and the passage of time. Traveling west across the ancient landscapes of Scotland, we encounter another prehistoric site where carefully arranged stones appear to preserve forgotten ideas about death, memory, and the changing seasons. In a quiet valley near Inverness in the Scottish Highlands, surrounded by rolling hills and open fields, lies Clava Cairns. At first glance, the site appears peaceful and almost untouched, with circles of weathered stones resting beneath the wide northern sky. Moss covers ancient surfaces, grass grows between carefully placed rocks, and the surrounding landscape seems unchanged from the distant past. Yet, beneath this calm setting lies one of Scotland's most intriguing prehistoric monuments, a place where architecture and astronomy appear to meet. Built around 2500 BC, during the Neolithic period and early Bronze Age transition, Clava Cairns represents a sophisticated understanding of stone construction and ceremonial design. The complex consists of several different structures, including passage graves, ring cairns, standing stones, and stone circles. Unlike ordinary settlements, these monuments were not designed for everyday living. They were places connected with remembrance, ritual, and perhaps the relationship between human existence and the wider natural world. The cairns themselves are among the most distinctive features. Created by arranging layers of stones into circular mounds, some contain internal chambers reached through narrow passages. These passages guide visitors from the outside world into enclosed spaces, creating a deliberate movement between light and darkness. Such design choices suggest that entering the monument was not simply a physical journey, but an experience shaped by symbolism. Archaeologists believe Clava Cairns was primarily associated with burial practices. Human remains discovered at similar monuments across the region indicate that these places were connected to ancestral memory and ceremonies surrounding the dead. However, the exact rituals performed here remain unknown. The builders left behind architecture, but not explanations. Why did they choose this location? The position of Clava Cairns has attracted particular attention because of its relationship with the surrounding landscape. The nearby hills, valleys, and horizon create a natural setting where the movement of the sun becomes especially noticeable. Some stones appear aligned with important solar events, including the winter solstice, when the sun reaches its lowest point in the sky. This has led researchers to suggest that the builders intentionally incorporated seasonal observations into the monument. In agricultural societies, understanding the cycles of the sun was essential. The changing length of daylight marked important moments for planting, harvesting, and community activities. Connecting burial monuments with these cycles may have reflected beliefs about death, renewal, and the continuation of existence. Yet, the full meaning remains uncertain. Did sunlight entering between the stones represent a symbolic return of life? Did the builders see ancestors as connected to the same cycles that governed the natural world? Or were these alignments practical observations incorporated into a place of remembrance? Without written records, each possibility must be carefully considered rather than accepted as fact. The mystery surrounding Clava Cairns has also encouraged more speculative interpretations. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have suggested that the monument's arrangement reflects a deeper understanding of astronomy or hidden patterns within the landscape. Others have proposed that the site may have functioned as a ceremonial center where communities gathered during significant moments of the year. While there is evidence that prehistoric people observed celestial cycles, claims of advanced astronomical knowledge beyond the archaeological record remain unproven. Still, the careful arrangement of the stones continues to inspire questions. The builders selected massive rocks, transported them across the landscape, and positioned them with patience and purpose. Their effort suggests that Clava Cairns represented something important enough to unite generations of people. It was not merely a structure, but a statement about how they understood their place within the world. Adding another layer of mystery is the relationship between Clava Cairns and later generations. Local traditions and folklore preserved stories about ancient stones long after their original meaning had faded. Like many prehistoric monuments, the site became surrounded by legends, allowing imagination to fill the spaces left by forgotten knowledge. Modern archaeology has revealed much about Clava Cairns, including its age, construction techniques, and possible ceremonial functions. Advanced surveys continue to examine the surrounding landscape, searching for clues about how the monument connected with nearby settlements and other prehistoric sites. But the central questions remain. Who were the people who stood within these stone circles thousands of years ago? What words were spoken inside the chambers when ceremonies took place? What emotions filled the air as sunlight touched the ancient stones during the darkest days of the year? Today, Clava Cairns remains silent beneath the highland sky. Its stones continue to mark a place where human memory, nature, and mystery meet. And perhaps somewhere within those carefully arranged circles lies a meaning that has not disappeared completely, but is simply waiting for us to learn how to recognize it. If Clava Cairns reveals how ancient communities transformed stone into a language of memory, the journey now continues to another landscape, where hills themselves became part of a vast, prehistoric design. Across the Irish countryside, where mist often settles over green valleys and distant ridges, another collection of ancient monuments waits quietly above the world below, preserving questions that have survived longer than the voices of their creators. On the summit of Slieve na Cailleach in County Meath, Ireland, overlooking a landscape shaped by rivers, fields, and countless generations of human activity, lie the Loughcrew Cairns. Rising along a series of hills, these ancient stone monuments appear almost like natural formations from a distance. Covered with grass and softened by centuries of weather, the cairns blend into the landscape, revealing their secrets only to those who approach carefully. Dating to around 3000 BC, during Ireland's Neolithic period, Loughcrew represents one of the most important groups of passage tombs in the country. Along with other great prehistoric complexes such as those at Bryn Celli Ddu, these monuments demonstrate that early farming communities possessed remarkable architectural knowledge, social organization, and a deep relationship with the cycles of nature. The largest and most famous structure at Loughcrew is known as Cairn T. Beneath its mound lies a cruciform passage chamber built from enormous stone slabs. These stones are not simply construction materials. Many carry carefully carved designs created thousands of years ago. Spirals, circles, zigzags, and geometric patterns cover their surfaces, forming a symbolic language whose exact meaning remains unknown. Unlike written words, these markings cannot be translated with certainty. They offer images without explanations, leaving modern observers to interpret their possible purpose. Archaeologists generally understand Loughcrew as a ceremonial burial complex. Human remains discovered within similar Irish passage tombs suggest that these monuments were connected to ancestral rituals and the treatment of the dead. The placement of bodies, the movement through narrow passages, and the careful positioning of stones all indicate that these were highly meaningful spaces rather than simple graves. But Loughcrew contains another remarkable feature. The builders appear to have aligned Cairn T with the movement of the sun. During the equinoxes, when day and night are approximately equal in length, sunlight enters the passage and illuminates the inner chamber. This relationship between architecture and celestial movement suggests that the builders carefully observed the changing patterns of the sky. Why was this moment so important? For Neolithic communities, the cycles of the sun governed agricultural life, seasonal activities, and the rhythm of survival. The arrival of light into a dark chamber may have symbolized renewal, transformation, or a connection between the living world and ancestral memory. Yet, the exact beliefs behind this design remain hidden. The stones reveal intention, but not the thoughts behind that intention. Some researchers suggest that the astronomical alignment was part of a broader understanding of time, allowing communities to mark important seasonal transitions. Others believe the relationship between sunlight and the burial chamber carried symbolic meaning, perhaps representing a journey from darkness into light, or a connection between earthly existence and cosmic order. Beyond these interpretations, Loughcrew has also inspired more speculative ideas. Some independent researchers have proposed that the carvings represent an early form of astronomical recording, suggesting that the symbols may encode observations of celestial events. Others have wondered whether the monument reflects a forgotten system of knowledge passed through generations. While prehistoric people clearly understood seasonal patterns, there is no confirmed evidence that the carvings contain complex astronomical messages. Still, the mystery of the artwork remains powerful. The symbols were created by people who invested enormous effort into shaping stone, transporting materials, and designing a monument that would endure beyond their own lifetimes. What compelled them to leave these marks behind? Were they messages for future generations, sacred symbols understood only by their creators, or expressions of beliefs that disappeared when their society changed? The surrounding landscape adds another layer of intrigue. From the heights of Loughcrew, distant hills and valleys stretch across the horizon, creating a natural panorama that would have been familiar to the monument's builders. The connection between elevated landscapes and prehistoric monuments appears throughout Ireland, suggesting that location itself held deep importance. Over thousands of years, however, much has been lost. Weather, erosion, and human activity have altered the site, while the original traditions surrounding its construction disappeared. Archaeology can identify materials, dates, and patterns, but it cannot fully recover the emotions of those who gathered here. Today, Loughcrew Cairns remains a quiet reminder of a world where stone, sky, and human memory were closely connected. Standing inside the ancient chamber as sunlight enters the darkness exactly as it did thousands of years ago, one is left with a question that continues to echo across the hills. Were these monuments built only to honor those who had passed, or were they also created to preserve a deeper understanding of existence that time has almost completely hidden? If Loughcrew Cairns reveals how ancient communities used stone and sunlight to preserve memories of the unseen, the journey now moves westward to another island landscape where the boundary between life, death, and the natural world appears carefully designed. Here, among the green fields of Wales, an ancient monument waits quietly beneath the open sky, carrying traces of beliefs that vanished long before written records could preserve them. On the Isle of Anglesey in northwestern Wales, surrounded by farmland and distant mountains, stands Bryn Celli Ddu. From the outside, the monument appears as a peaceful circular mound enclosed by stones, blending naturally into the landscape. The wind moves gently across the fields, and the surrounding countryside gives little indication that this quiet place once held deep significance for a prehistoric community. Yet, beneath the grassy surface lies a structure built with extraordinary intention. Bryn Celli Ddu, meaning the mound in the dark grove in Welsh, is one of the most remarkable prehistoric monuments in Wales. Originally constructed during the Neolithic period, around 3000 BC, it was first created as a henge, a circular ceremonial enclosure surrounded by a ditch and earthwork. Later, during the Bronze Age, the site was transformed into a passage tomb, with a stone-lined chamber placed beneath a carefully shaped mound. This transformation itself raises intriguing questions. Why was an existing ceremonial space redesigned for burial purposes? Did later generations inherit a sacred location and adapt it to their own beliefs? Or did the builders see continuity between honoring the living community and remembering those who came before? Archaeology provides some answers. Excavations have revealed a central stone chamber, a narrow passage leading inward, and a large, upright pillar known as the pattern stone, which bears unusual markings. Human remains discovered at the site indicate that Bryn Celli Ddu was associated with funerary practices. Like many prehistoric monuments across Britain and Ireland, it appears to have been a place where communities engaged with ideas surrounding ancestry, identity, and the relationship between the physical and spiritual worlds. But the most fascinating feature of Bryn Celli Ddu may be its connection with the sun. The passage is aligned so that during the summer solstice, sunlight enters the chamber and illuminates the interior. This alignment suggests that the builders carefully observed the movement of the sun and incorporated it into the design of the monument. The moment when sunlight reaches the hidden chamber would have been dramatic, a brief encounter between the outside world and an enclosed, sacred space. What did that light represent? Some archaeologists suggest that solar alignments reflected seasonal awareness, helping communities mark important points in the agricultural year. Others believe the interaction between sunlight and burial chambers carried symbolic meaning, perhaps representing renewal, transformation, or the continued presence of ancestors. However, the exact beliefs of the builders remain unknown. The stones provide evidence of careful planning, but they do not reveal the stories that surrounded these ceremonies. We can observe the alignment, measure the structure, and analyze the remains, but the thoughts of those who stood inside the chamber thousands of years ago remain beyond direct recovery. The mystery deepens when considering the unusual carvings found at the site. The markings on the pillar stone have inspired various interpretations. Some researchers believe they may represent symbolic designs connected to ritual activity, while others have suggested possible links to wider traditions of prehistoric artwork found throughout the British Isles. Their meaning, however, remains uncertain. As with many ancient monuments, speculation has grown around Bryn Celli Ddu. Some independent researchers have proposed that the site may have served as an advanced astronomical observatory, suggesting that the builders possessed detailed knowledge of celestial patterns. Others have wondered whether the monument was connected to forgotten ceremonial traditions that once spread across ancient Europe. While prehistoric communities clearly understood seasonal cycles, there is currently no evidence confirming interpretations that extend beyond its known archaeological context. Still, the design itself remains remarkable. The builders selected the location, shaped the landscape, transported stones, and created a structure where earth, stone, and sunlight interacted with precision. Such effort suggests that Bryn Celli Ddu represented something far greater than a simple burial place. It was a statement about connection between generations, between the human world and the natural environment, and perhaps between the visible and invisible. Over centuries, the monument changed. Some stones disappeared, parts of the structure collapsed, and the original rituals faded from memory. Yet the central passage remains, still guiding sunlight into darkness in a pattern created by people who lived thousands of years ago. Today, standing within Bryn Celli Ddu, it is difficult not to wonder about the moments that once unfolded here. Who gathered beneath this mound? What words were spoken as sunlight entered the chamber? And what meaning did the builders place upon a monument designed to survive long after their own voices had disappeared? The stones remain silent, but they continue to ask the same question that has followed humanity across the ages. How much knowledge can survive when the people who created it are gone? If Bryn Celli Ddu reveals how ancient people used stone and sunlight to preserve connections between generations, the journey now moves toward a vast landscape where an entire empire once attempted to express its vision of order, power, and destiny. Here, beneath the mountains of ancient Persia, the remains of a royal city stand quietly among empty plains, preserving the ambitions of one of history's most influential rulers. In the open valleys of Fars province in present-day Iran, surrounded by rugged mountains and wide fields, lies Pasargadae. At first glance, the site appears almost impossibly quiet. Scattered stone foundations, towering gateways, and weathered platforms stretch across the landscape, separated by great distances. Unlike crowded cities that reveal their past through layers of buildings and activity, Pasargadae feels like a place where time has deliberately slowed. Yet, this peaceful landscape was once the heart of a powerful empire. Founded in the 6th century BC by Cyrus the Great, the first ruler of the Achaemenid Empire, Pasargadae became the earliest royal capital of one of the ancient world's largest political powers. From this location, an empire would eventually expand across vast territories, connecting different peoples, languages, and traditions from Central Asia to the Mediterranean. The city was not designed simply as a place of administration. Its layout reflected a carefully planned vision of kingship and authority. Monumental gateways, royal gardens, audience halls, and ceremonial structures were arranged across an enormous landscape, creating a relationship between architecture and nature that was unusual for its time. Perhaps the most famous structure at Pasargadae is the tomb believed to belong to Cyrus the Great. Standing alone on a raised platform, the stone tomb appears remarkably simple compared with the enormous monuments later built by Persian kings. Its design consists of a stepped base supporting a small chamber with a sloping roof. There are no overwhelming carvings, no endless inscriptions, and no display of excessive decoration. Instead, the structure communicates a different kind of power, one based on restraint and permanence. But even this monument carries unanswered questions. Was the simplicity intentional, reflecting Cyrus's personal philosophy of leadership? Was the design influenced by earlier traditions from neighboring cultures? Or did the structure contain symbolic meanings understood by people of the Achaemenid world but lost to later generations? Ancient sources describe Cyrus as a remarkable ruler whose policies toward conquered peoples were considered unusual for the ancient world. His reputation grew through accounts written centuries later, including descriptions of his respect for local customs and religious traditions. However, separating historical reality from later interpretation remains a challenge. Like many figures from the ancient past, Cyrus exists somewhere between documented history and the powerful legends that developed around him. Beyond the tomb, Pasargadae's royal gardens provide another fascinating mystery. The site contains evidence of carefully designed gardens known as paradises, a concept that later influenced Persian garden traditions. These spaces combined water channels, vegetation, and geometric planning, creating controlled environments that represented harmony between human design and the natural world. The Persian word connected with these gardens would eventually influence languages far beyond the region, giving rise to the familiar concept of paradise. Why did the rulers of Pasargadae place such importance on gardens? Some historians believe they represented royal authority over nature itself, a visible expression of order and prosperity. Others suggest that gardens carried deeper symbolic meanings, representing ideal worlds where balance existed between humanity, the environment, and the divine. The city's architecture also reflects a remarkable blend of influences. Egyptian columns, Mesopotamian artistic traditions, and local Persian techniques appear together, revealing an empire that absorbed ideas rather than simply replacing them. Pasargadae became a meeting point where different civilizations contributed to a shared imperial identity. Yet, as with many ancient capitals, the city's decline remains part of its mystery. After Cyrus's successors moved the imperial center to Persepolis and other locations, Pasargadae gradually lost its political importance. Buildings deteriorated, stones were reused, and the once grand capital slowly faded into the landscape. It was not destroyed in a single dramatic event. Instead, it experienced the quieter disappearance that affects many places after their purpose has changed. Over time, legends continued to surround the site. Some traditions connected the tomb with sacred figures, while others created stories about hidden treasures and forgotten knowledge. These tales reflect humanity's tendency to surround abandoned places with imagination, especially when the original voices behind them have vanished. Modern archaeology has uncovered much about Pasargadae through excavation, architectural study, and historical comparison. Researchers can reconstruct its layout, identify building techniques, and understand its role within the Achaemenid Empire. Yet, the personal experiences of those who walked its halls remain distant. What did ordinary people feel when they entered this royal city? What ceremonies unfolded beneath its monumental gateways? What ideas about life, death, and eternity inspired the creation of a capital designed to endure beyond the lifetime of its founder? Today, the stones of Pasargadae remain scattered beneath the Persian sky, carrying fragments of a world that once connected continents. And perhaps the greatest mystery is not how such a city was built, but what thoughts and dreams were placed into its foundations by the people who believed their creation would speak long after they were gone. If Pasargadae reveals how rulers attempted to preserve their vision through monumental landscapes, the journey now turns toward a different kind of mystery, one shaped not by royal ambition alone, but by the rise and sudden transformation of an ancient city. Far from the ceremonial avenues of Persia, across the dry plains of northern Mesopotamia, a forgotten settlement emerges from the earth, revealing the fragile foundations of one of humanity's earliest urban experiments. In the northeastern region of present-day Syria, surrounded by open steppe and distant hills, lies Tel Leilan. From the surface, the site appears as a large mound rising quietly above the surrounding landscape. To an untrained eye, it may look like nothing more than a natural hill shaped by wind and time. Yet, beneath its layers of soil rests the remains of a city that witnessed extraordinary changes in human society thousands of years ago. Tel Leilan was first settled during the Neolithic period, but it reached its greatest importance during the Bronze Age. By the 3rd millennium BC, it had become a major urban center known as Shekna, and later it was transformed into the powerful city of Shubat-Enlil under the rule of the Assyrian king Shamshi-Adad I during the early 2nd millennium BC. Its story is one of ambition, organization, and adaptation. Archaeological excavations have revealed massive city walls, administrative buildings, residential areas, temples, and evidence of complex economic activity. Clay tablets discovered at the site provide glimpses into daily administration, including records of trade, taxation, labor organization, and political decisions. These fragile documents offer rare moments where the voices of ancient officials appear across thousands of years, describing a society carefully managing resources and power. But perhaps the most fascinating mystery of Tel Leilan is not its rise. It is its collapse. Around 2200 BC, the city experienced a dramatic decline. Archaeological evidence suggests that the abandonment occurred during a period of widespread disruption across the ancient Near East. Many settlements throughout the region suffered similar crises, leading researchers to investigate what forces could have affected such a large area. One of the most discussed explanations involves climate change. Scientific studies of ancient soil layers at Tel Leilan indicate that the region experienced a severe drought during this period. Reduced rainfall would have placed enormous pressure on agricultural communities that depended on reliable harvests. A city built around farming, trade, and food production could have faced increasing difficulty supporting its population as environmental conditions changed. But climate alone may not explain everything. Some researchers suggest that political instability, economic shifts, and changes in regional power networks also contributed to the city's decline. Civilizations rarely disappear because of a single cause. Instead, multiple pressures can gradually weaken even the most organized societies until abandonment becomes unavoidable. The evidence from Tel Leilan raises a question that feels surprisingly modern. How does a complex civilization respond when the conditions that created its success begin to change? The city's remains reveal a society that understood administration, planning, and cooperation. Yet, even advanced systems have limits. The same networks that allow a city to flourish can become vulnerable when resources become uncertain. Beyond these archaeological explanations, Tel Leilan has also inspired broader speculation about the fragility of early civilization. Some observers have suggested that the city represents an ancient warning about the relationship between humanity and environmental change. Others have wondered whether the abandonment of such places reflects repeating patterns that appear throughout human history, periods of growth followed by sudden transformation. However, the physical evidence remains the foundation of understanding. The tablets, buildings, and environmental records provide a detailed but incomplete picture. They show what happened, but they cannot fully reveal how people experienced these events. What did the citizens of Tel Leilan feel as their city began to struggle? Did they recognize the danger approaching, or did the transformation happen gradually, almost unnoticed? Did families leave in search of better opportunities, or did they remain until the final days of urban life? The city's later history adds another layer of complexity. After its decline, Tel Leilan was eventually reoccupied and became important again under Assyrian rule. This cycle of abandonment and renewal demonstrates that ancient cities were not simply lost forever. They could disappear, return, and transform as new generations reshaped the same landscape. Today, Tel Leilan stands as a reminder that civilization is never as permanent as it appears. Beneath the mound lie layers of human effort, homes built, records written, decisions made, and lives lived by people who believed their world would continue. Yet, the silent ruins leave one question behind. When a city disappears, what truly vanishes first? The buildings, the culture, or the memories of the people who created them? And beneath the untouched layers of Tel Leilan, what forgotten stories may still be waiting to emerge? If Tel Leilan reveals how even powerful cities can be reshaped by forces beyond human control, the journey now moves toward the western edge of the ancient world, where another forgotten settlement tells a different story. Here, on the dry plains of the Iberian Peninsula, an early fortified community emerged long before many familiar civilizations reached their height, leaving behind stone walls, mysterious tombs, and unanswered questions about the origins of organized society in Europe. Near the modern city of Almeria, in southeastern Spain, surrounded by rugged hills and the wide landscapes of the Andalusian coast, lies Los Millares. At first glance, the site appears quiet and almost abandoned, with only fragments of ancient stone structures visible beneath the Mediterranean sky. Yet, more than 4,000 years ago, this was one of the most remarkable settlements of prehistoric Europe, a carefully planned community protected by enormous defenses and connected to a world of trade, craftsmanship, and ritual. Established around 3200 BC during the Copper Age, Los Millares represents one of the earliest examples of complex settlement development in Western Europe. Unlike small farming villages that existed throughout the region, Los Millares grew into a large fortified center with defensive walls, towers, dwellings, workshops, and ceremonial structures. Its scale suggests a society with advanced organization, specialized labor, and strong social coordination. The first impression created by the site is one of protection. 3 separate defensive walls surrounded the settlement, reinforced with numerous circular bastions designed to strengthen its boundaries. The effort required to construct these defenses would have been immense. Thousands of stones had to be collected, transported, and carefully arranged by people using only simple tools and human strength. Why did this community invest so much energy into fortification? Archaeologists have suggested several explanations. Competition over resources, control of trade routes, and conflicts between neighboring groups may have encouraged the development of defensive architecture. The location itself was strategically chosen, positioned near fertile lands, water sources, and routes connecting different regions of the Iberian Peninsula. But the walls of Los Millares may have protected more than just physical space. Within and around the settlement, archaeologists discovered evidence of metalworking, especially the production of copper tools and objects. This technology represented a major transformation in human society, allowing communities to create stronger tools, develop new crafts, and establish networks of exchange. The ability to produce and control valuable materials may have increased social differences, creating new forms of authority. Nearby, dozens of burial structures known as tholos tombs reveal another dimension of the culture. These circular stone tombs, often covered with earth and containing carefully arranged burial chambers, suggest complex beliefs surrounding death and ancestry. Inside, archaeologists discovered human remains along with pottery, tools, weapons, and decorative objects. These offerings indicate that burial practices were not simply about disposing of the dead, but about maintaining relationships between the living community and those who had passed away. Yet, the deeper meaning of these rituals remains uncertain. Were these tombs places where communities honored powerful ancestors? Did certain individuals receive special treatment because they held authority during life? Or did the monuments represent a shared spiritual tradition connecting entire generations? The absence of written records leaves these questions open. The architecture of Los Millares has also inspired broader discussions about cultural connections across the ancient Mediterranean. Some researchers have explored similarities between Iberian Copper Age monuments and structures found elsewhere in Europe and the Mediterranean world. These comparisons raise questions about migration, trade, and the movement of ideas across great distances. More speculative interpretations have suggested that Los Millares may have been connected to lost maritime networks or forgotten civilizations that influenced early European development. While long-distance contact certainly existed in the ancient Mediterranean, evidence for more extraordinary claims remains limited. The site continues to be understood primarily through archaeology, material remains, and careful comparison with other prehistoric communities. Perhaps the most intriguing mystery is the disappearance of the settlement itself. Around 2200 BC, Los Millares declined and was eventually abandoned. As with many ancient communities, the reasons remain debated. Changes in climate, pressure on local resources, social conflict, or shifts in trade patterns may all have contributed. The collapse appears less like a sudden ending and more like a gradual transformation, as the world around the settlement changed. Today, the ruins of Los Millares stand beneath the same sunlight that once illuminated its stone walls thousands of years ago. The defensive structures remain as evidence of human determination, while the tombs preserve fragments of beliefs that can no longer be fully recovered. Standing among the remains, it is difficult not to wonder about the people who built this extraordinary place. What fears led them to raise such powerful walls? What hopes inspired them to create monuments for their ancestors? And how much of their knowledge, their stories, and their understanding of the world disappeared when the last inhabitants walked away from the stones they had carefully shaped? Perhaps Los Millares does not only preserve the history of an ancient settlement. Perhaps it preserves a much older question: how civilizations rise, how they endure, and why even the strongest foundations can eventually become silent beneath the passage of time. If Los Millares reveals how early communities built walls to protect their resources, their beliefs, and their memories, the journey now moves to an island where another ancient society shaped its own mysterious world from towering stones and carefully arranged spaces. Across the Mediterranean, on a landscape marked by dry fields and endless skies, another prehistoric settlement waits quietly, preserving traces of a culture whose purpose is still only partially understood. On the island of Minorca, in the Balearic Islands, surrounded by the calm waters of the western Mediterranean, lies Talatí de Dalt. Hidden among olive trees and low vegetation, the ruins of this ancient settlement appear almost peaceful, blending naturally with the surrounding landscape. Weathered stones rest beneath the sun, while massive monuments rise from the ground as reminders of a society that flourished thousands of years ago. Talatí de Dalt belongs to the Talayotic culture, a prehistoric society that developed on Minorca and Majorca during the Bronze Age and continued into the Iron Age. Beginning around 1000 BC, these communities created a unique architectural tradition built around enormous stone structures known as talayots, along with ceremonial spaces, houses, and defensive features. The settlement at Talatí de Dalt offers an unusually detailed glimpse into daily life within this ancient world. Unlike some prehistoric monuments that exist only as isolated structures, Talatí de Dalt preserves evidence of a complete community. Archaeologists have uncovered circular houses, storage areas, workspaces, and religious or ceremonial spaces, revealing a society that was carefully organized. The arrangement of buildings suggests that the inhabitants understood how to manage domestic life, agriculture, craftsmanship, and social gatherings within a shared environment. At the heart of the settlement stands one of its most remarkable features, a tala sanctuary. The tala is formed by two enormous stone slabs placed together, creating a shape resembling a giant table or doorway. These monuments are among the most distinctive features of Minorca's prehistoric landscape, yet their exact purpose remains one of archaeology's enduring questions. What happened beneath these towering stones? Researchers generally believe that talas were connected to ritual activities. Their placement within enclosed sacred areas suggests that they were not ordinary architectural features. Some interpretations propose that they served as locations for ceremonies involving offerings, community gatherings, or communication with spiritual forces. However, without written records from the Talayodic people themselves, the precise meaning of these structures remains uncertain. The physical effort required to create such monuments adds another layer of mystery. The stones used at Talatí de Dalt are enormous, requiring careful extraction, transportation, and placement. This demanded cooperation between many individuals and suggests that the construction of sacred spaces was an important priority for the community. Why dedicate so much labor to monuments whose purpose was not practical in the ordinary sense? Perhaps the answer lies in how ancient societies understood their relationship with the world around them. The Talayodic people lived in an environment shaped by the sea, changing seasons, and limited natural resources. Their architecture reflects both adaptation and identity. The tall defensive towers, enclosed settlements, and ceremonial spaces may have represented not only survival strategies but also expressions of belonging and collective memory. Yet Talatí de Dalt still holds unanswered questions. Some researchers have explored whether the orientation of certain structures reflects awareness of astronomical cycles or seasonal changes. Similar discussions exist around many prehistoric monuments throughout the Mediterranean and Europe, where ancient builders often incorporated observations of the sky into their landscapes. While the Talayodic people certainly understood natural cycles important for farming and navigation, the extent of any astronomical purpose at Talatí de Dalt remains debated. Beyond mainstream archaeology, more speculative ideas have also emerged. Some independent researchers have suggested that the taulas may represent remnants of forgotten spiritual traditions shared across ancient Mediterranean cultures. Others have wondered whether the unusual stone arrangements contain symbolic meanings connected to creation, balance, or cosmic forces. These interpretations remain difficult to verify, but they demonstrate the powerful effect these monuments continue to have on human imagination. The settlement also raises questions about decline. By the Roman conquest of the Balearic Islands in the 2nd century BC, the Talayodic world began to change dramatically. New political structures, economic systems, and cultural influences gradually transformed the island. Some traditional practices disappeared, while others adapted to the new order. Today, Talatí de Dalt stands as a fragment of a civilization that left behind impressive structures but very few explanations. Archaeology can reveal how the settlement was built, what people ate, how they worked, and how they organized their spaces. But the deeper meanings, the fears, hopes, and beliefs that shaped their monuments remain hidden. Walking among the ancient stones of Talatí de Dalt, surrounded by the same Mediterranean landscape known by its builders, one is left with a quiet question. Were these monuments created only for the needs of their own time, or were they designed to preserve a message that would continue long after the voices of the Talayodic people had disappeared? If Talatí de Dalt reveals how island communities transformed stone into symbols of identity and belief, the journey now returns to the ancient landscapes of Mesopotamia, where some of humanity's earliest cities emerged. Here, beneath the dry winds of southern Iraq, another forgotten settlement rests among the remains of a world that witnessed the birth of writing, organized government, and complex urban life. In the wide plains of ancient Sumer, near the modern city of Nasiriyah in southern Iraq, lies al-Aqarib. From the surface, the site appears as a series of low mounds rising from an otherwise open and quiet landscape. There are no towering monuments visible from afar, no obvious signs of the powerful city that once existed here. Yet, beneath these layers of soil are the remains of a settlement connected to one of the earliest chapters of human civilization. The name al-Aqarib, meaning Mother of Scorpions, reflects the harsh environment surrounding the site. The landscape is shaped by heat, wind, and vast stretches of desert terrain. But thousands of years ago, this region was very different. The waterways of southern Mesopotamia supported agriculture, trade, and dense populations, allowing cities to develop in an environment that would later become far more difficult to inhabit. Al-Aqarib flourished during the early dynastic period of Sumer, roughly between 2900 and 2300 BC. During this era, southern Mesopotamia was divided into competing city-states, each ruled by powerful leaders who controlled agriculture, religion, trade, and military forces. Cities such as Uruk, and Lagash became centers of innovation, and al-Aqarib appears to have been part of this same dynamic world. Archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence of monumental buildings, administrative areas, and elite structures, suggesting that the settlement was not a simple village, but an important urban center. The remains indicate organized planning and the existence of institutions capable of managing large populations and resources. Among the most significant discoveries are large mud brick structures associated with public and possibly ceremonial functions. These buildings reflect the architectural traditions of early Sumerian cities, where temples and administrative complexes formed the heart of urban life. But like many ancient Mesopotamian sites, al-Aqarib raises a fundamental question. Who exactly controlled this city, and what role did it play within the constantly shifting political landscape of Sumer? The absence of abundant written records from the site itself makes interpretation challenging. While neighboring cities left behind inscriptions naming kings, battles, and achievements, al-Aqarib remains comparatively quiet. Archaeologists must reconstruct its history through architecture, artifacts, and comparisons with better documented settlements. This silence creates space for mystery. Researchers believe the site may have been connected with the ancient city-state of Umma, a major Sumerian power known from historical texts and conflicts with neighboring cities. The region around al-Aqarib was strategically important because control of farmland and waterways determined wealth and survival. Competition over these resources shaped much of early Mesopotamian history. Could al-Aqarib have been part of these struggles for power? Did its inhabitants witness alliances, conflicts, and political changes that shaped the future of Sumer? Or did the city follow its own path, separate from the better-known centers that dominate historical records? Beyond archaeological explanations, the site has also encouraged broader speculation about the origins of urban civilization. Some independent researchers have suggested that lesser-known settlements like al-Aqarib may contain evidence of forgotten political systems or early developments that remain underestimated. Others have wondered whether the uneven preservation of ancient cities has caused certain civilizations to become more famous simply because their remains survived more clearly. These ideas highlight a genuine challenge in archaeology. The surviving record is never complete. What we know about the ancient world is shaped not only by what existed, but by what endured. The eventual decline of al-Aqarib remains part of its mystery. Like many Sumerian settlements, it was affected by changing political conditions, environmental pressures, and shifts in regional power. The waterways that supported civilization could also become unpredictable, and competition between city-states could transform once thriving communities. Yet, abandonment does not mean disappearance. The remains beneath the earth still preserve traces of daily life, fragments of pottery, walls built by forgotten hands, and spaces where people once worked, worshipped, and planned for the future. Every artifact recovered adds another piece to a story that is still incomplete. Standing on the quiet plains where al-Aqarib once existed, it becomes difficult not to reflect on how many early cities remain only partially understood. The first civilizations did not appear fully formed. They were created through countless experiments, decisions, and struggles by people whose names are often lost. And beneath the ancient soil of al-Aqarib, another question remains waiting. How many stories of humanity's earliest cities are still hidden, not because they were forgotten, but because they have simply not yet been uncovered? If al-Aqarib reveals the fragile beginnings of cities built around rivers, resources, and human ambition, the journey now moves further back into the shadows of prehistory, before kings, written records, and monumental temples defined civilization. In the foothills of the Zagros Mountains, another ancient settlement preserves a different kind of mystery. The story of the first communities that began transforming from mobile groups into permanent societies. In the rolling landscape of Iraqi Kurdistan, surrounded by fertile valleys and mountain horizons, lies Bestansur. From a distance, the site appears as a modest archaeological mound rising above the surrounding fields. There are no towering structures or dramatic ruins visible on the surface. Instead, its secrets remain buried beneath layers of earth, waiting to reveal a time when humanity was taking one of its most important steps, the transition toward settled life. Bestansur dates back to the Neolithic period, around 7000 BC, making it thousands of years older than many famous civilizations of the ancient Near East. During this era, communities across the region were experimenting with agriculture, animal domestication, and permanent architecture. They were gradually moving away from purely mobile lifestyles and creating new ways of living together. The importance of Bestansur lies not in grand monuments, but in the evidence of ordinary life. Archaeological excavations have uncovered remains of mud brick houses, storage areas, hearths, tools, and everyday objects that reveal how people organize their communities. These discoveries provide a rare glimpse into a period when humans were learning how to build stable settlements and manage resources over long periods. The architecture suggests careful planning. The inhabitants constructed rectangular buildings with multiple rooms, creating spaces for sleeping, storing food, and carrying out daily activities. Such structures indicate that these communities possess knowledge of construction, cooperation, and social organization. They were not simply surviving from day to day. They were developing systems that would eventually shape the foundations of later civilizations. But with permanent settlement came new challenges. Living in one place changed humanity's relationship with food, land, and each other. Agriculture created stability, but it also introduced questions of ownership, resource management, and social organization. Bestansur provides a window into this transformation, a moment when humans were beginning to reshape both their environment and themselves. One of the most fascinating discoveries from the site involves evidence of ritual and symbolic activity. Researchers have uncovered objects and burial practices that suggest the community held complex beliefs about death and memory. Human remains found within or near settlement areas indicate that ancestors remained closely connected to daily life. The boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead appears to have been far less separated than it is in many modern societies. What did these early communities believe about those who came before them? Did they see ancestors as protectors of the household? Did burial practices preserve family identity across generations? Or were these rituals part of a broader understanding of existence that has been almost completely lost? Without written language, the answers remain uncertain. Bestansur also contributes to a larger archaeological mystery: how and why farming communities emerged in different parts of the ancient Near East. The transition to agriculture was not a single event with one explanation. It developed through gradual experimentation, adaptation, and environmental change. Sites like Bestansur reveal that this transformation was shaped by countless decisions made by ordinary people whose names will never be known. Some more speculative interpretations have suggested that early Neolithic settlements may contain hidden evidence of forgotten knowledge systems or social structures far more complex than previously assumed. While archaeology continues to reveal increasing sophistication among these communities, there is currently no evidence supporting extraordinary claims beyond what the material record demonstrates. Still, the discoveries at Bestansur remain remarkable. Here was a community living thousands of years before written history, creating homes, preserving memories, and developing traditions that would influence future generations. Their world may appear distant, but many of the challenges they faced remain familiar: how to cooperate, how to use resources wisely, and how to create a lasting place within an unpredictable environment. The settlement eventually changed as the Neolithic period progressed. New communities emerged, technologies developed, and human societies continued their long journey toward larger villages and eventually cities. Yet, Bestansur preserves a moment before those transformations became complete. Standing above the ancient mound today, surrounded by the quiet landscape of the Zagros foothills, it is worth remembering that civilization did not begin with palaces or empires. It began with small communities making decisions that slowly changed the course of humanity. And beneath the layers of Bestansur, hidden among the remains of homes and forgotten pathways, there may still be clues waiting to reveal what these early settlers truly understood about family, survival, and the mysterious future they were unknowingly creating. If Bestansur reveals the quiet beginnings of settled life, when humanity first learned to build permanent homes and preserve memories in one place, the journey now moves toward a landscape where stone itself appears to carry messages from a distant age. Far beyond the first farming villages of the ancient Near East, on a high mountain plateau of the South Caucasus, thousands of carefully arranged stones stand beneath the open sky, raising questions about time, purpose, and human curiosity. In the mountains of southern Armenia, near the town of Sisian, lies Karahunge. Spread across a vast rocky landscape, the site consists of hundreds of upright basalt stones arranged in lines, circles, and groups. Weathered by wind and centuries of exposure, the stones rise from the earth like silent markers left behind by people whose intentions remain only partly understood. The name Karahunge is often translated as speaking stones or singing stones, a name connected to local interpretations and traditions surrounding the site. Whether the stones truly carried sound, messages, or symbolic meaning to their builders remains uncertain. Yet, the name itself reflects a feeling that has surrounded the monument for generations, the sense that these stones are not simply objects, but remnants of a forgotten conversation. Dating Karahunge has been the subject of considerable discussion. Some researchers have suggested that parts of the site may date back several thousand years, possibly to the Bronze Age or earlier. Others have argued for much older origins, proposing connections with prehistoric astronomical observation. However, establishing a precise construction date remains difficult, and there is no universal agreement among archaeologists about when the monument first took shape. What is certain is that the site represents a significant human effort. The basalt stones, some weighing several tons, were transported, positioned, and arranged across the landscape. Many contain carefully shaped holes passing through their surfaces, creating one of Karahunge's most distinctive features. These openings have fascinated researchers and visitors alike, inspiring questions about their purpose. Why were these holes created? The most widely accepted explanations connect the stones with practical or ceremonial functions. Some researchers believe the openings may have been used during rituals, observations, or symbolic activities. Others suggest they may have helped define spaces within the larger monument or played a role in marking important locations. The relationship between Karahunge and the sky has attracted particular attention. Because several stones appear to align with directions associated with celestial events, some researchers have proposed that the monument functioned as an ancient astronomical observatory. They suggest that the builders may have used the stones to track the movement of the sun, moon, or certain stars, helping them understand seasonal changes. In agricultural societies, observing the sky was essential. The timing of planting, harvesting, and important ceremonies often depended on knowledge of natural cycles. Therefore, the possibility that ancient communities carefully studied celestial movements is not unusual. However, the extent of Karuhunga's astronomical purpose remains debated. Some scholars argue that apparent alignments can occur naturally when large groups of stones are arranged across a landscape. Without written records or clear archaeological evidence, it is difficult to determine whether the builders intentionally created a sophisticated sky-watching system, or whether later interpretations have given the stones meanings they never originally possessed. Beyond mainstream archaeology, Karuhunga has inspired more speculative ideas. Some independent researchers have compared the site to famous prehistoric monuments elsewhere in the world, suggesting that ancient cultures may have shared forgotten knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, or sacred geography. Others have proposed that the arrangement of stones reflects a deeper symbolic understanding of the universe. These interpretations remain unproven, but they highlight an enduring fascination with prehistoric monuments, the possibility that ancient people understood their world in ways that modern observers are still learning to recognize. The true mystery of Karuhunga may not lie only in what the stones were used for, but in why humans felt compelled to create such places at all. Across continents and throughout time, people have raised stones toward the sky, marked landscapes, and created structures that outlasted their own societies. These monuments suggest a desire to connect with something larger than everyday survival, a need to measure time, remember ancestors, or understand humanity's position within the vastness of nature. Today, Karuhunga remains exposed to the same mountains, winds, and skies that surrounded its creators. Researchers continue to study the site, using archaeology, astronomy, and environmental analysis to uncover more about its origins. Yet the stones remain quiet. Standing among them, surrounded by the distant mountains of Armenia, one cannot help but wonder what thoughts guided the people who placed them there. Were they recording the heavens, honoring unseen forces, gathering as a community, or creating something whose meaning would only be questioned thousands of years later? Perhaps the greatest mystery of Karuhunga is not what the stones reveal, but what they continue to withhold, waiting patiently beneath the open sky for future discoveries to bring another fragment of their forgotten story into the light. If Karuhunga reminds us that ancient people looked beyond the horizon and toward the sky for meaning, the journey now returns to the Mediterranean, where another mysterious landscape reveals humanity's desire to shape stone into symbols of power, identity, and memory. On a remote island shaped by the sea and wind, an immense tower of ancient stone rises from the earth, preserving the achievements of a civilization whose voice disappeared thousands of years ago. In the northern part of Sardinia, Italy, surrounded by open countryside near the town of Torralba, stands Santu Antine. Known as one of the greatest nuraghi of the island, this massive stone structure dominates the landscape with a quiet but powerful presence. Its enormous basalt blocks, carefully placed without mortar, create an architecture that feels both ancient and strangely timeless. From a distance, it resembles a natural formation shaped by the land itself. Only when approached closely does its true complexity become visible. Santu Antine belongs to the Nuragic civilization of Sardinia, a prehistoric culture that developed during the Bronze Age, beginning around 1800 BC. This society left behind thousands of stone structures across the island, but the nuraghi remain its most recognizable achievement. These towering constructions, built from massive stones arranged into circular towers, represent one of the most distinctive architectural traditions of ancient Europe. Among them, Santu Antine stands apart. The structure is often called the King's Tower because of its exceptional size and complexity. Its central tower rises several meters above the surrounding landscape and was originally connected to additional towers and defensive walls, creating a carefully planned architectural system. Inside, narrow corridors, stairways, and chambers reveal an impressive understanding of construction and spatial organization. But what exactly was Santu Antine built for? This question has occupied researchers for decades. The most widely accepted interpretation is that nuraghi served multiple purposes. They may have functioned as fortified residences, places of political authority, storage centers, or symbolic landmarks representing the power of local communities. Their defensive appearance suggests protection was important, especially during periods when competition over land, resources, and influence shaped life across the Mediterranean. Yet, reducing Santu Antine to a simple fortress may overlook its deeper significance. The effort required to build such a monument was enormous. Transporting and positioning enormous basalt blocks demanded cooperation, planning, and skilled craftsmanship. A structure of this scale represented more than practical protection. It demonstrated the ability of a community to organize itself around a shared vision. What inspired people thousands of years ago to dedicate so much labor to stone? Was it fear of enemies, the desire to display authority, a connection to beliefs about ancestors and the forces of nature? The answers remain incomplete. Inside Santu Antine, the design itself creates a sense of mystery. The corridors are carefully arranged, with stairways leading upward and chambers positioned deep within the structure. The movement through the building would have been controlled and deliberate, guiding people through narrow spaces before revealing larger rooms. Some researchers believe this architectural experience may have had symbolic importance. Entering the structure could have represented a transition from ordinary life into a more significant space associated with leadership, ritual, or community identity. The Nuragic civilization left behind few written records, making interpretation difficult. Unlike later Mediterranean cultures, the builders of Santu Antine did not leave detailed accounts explaining their beliefs, political systems, or daily lives. Their history survives primarily through stone, pottery, tools, and the remains of settlements. This absence has allowed many questions to remain open. Archaeologists have discovered evidence that Nuragic communities participated in long-distance exchange networks. Objects from distant regions demonstrate contact with other Mediterranean societies, including groups connected with the Eastern Mediterranean. Sardinia was not isolated. It existed within a wider world of movement, trade, and cultural interaction. Could Santu Antine have been part of a larger network of power and communication across the ancient Mediterranean? Some researchers have explored whether the nuraghi functioned as territorial markers, allowing communities to demonstrate control over important areas. Their visibility across the landscape may have carried a message. This land was occupied, organized, and protected. Others have considered more symbolic possibilities. The circular shape of many nuraghi has led some observers to explore connections with ancient concepts of cycles, protection, and community unity. The towers rise from the earth like permanent markers between the human world and the surrounding environment. While such interpretations are difficult to prove, they reflect a broader pattern found throughout ancient cultures, where architecture often carried meanings beyond practical function. More speculative theories have also surrounded Santu Antine. Some independent researchers have suggested that the nuraghi may have served astronomical purposes, using their orientation and construction to track celestial events. Others have proposed that these structures preserve traces of an advanced, prehistoric understanding now lost. However, while ancient communities certainly observed the natural world and understood seasonal cycles, There is currently limited archaeological evidence supporting claims of highly developed systems of astronomical knowledge at Santu Antine. The true mystery may be found somewhere between practicality and symbolism. A monument can defend a community while also expressing its identity. It can provide shelter while representing power. It can serve daily needs while carrying meanings understood only by those who built it. The decline of the Nuragic civilization adds another layer of uncertainty. Over time, Sardinia experienced increasing influence from outside powers, including Phoenician, Carthaginian, and Roman expansion. The world surrounding Santu Antine changed dramatically. The political structures and traditions that created the Great Nuragi gradually disappeared, leaving these massive towers as silent witnesses to a vanished era. Yet Santu Antine survived. Through centuries of weather, conflict, and changing civilizations, its stones remained standing. They preserve evidence of human skill and ambition, but they also preserve something more difficult to recover: the thoughts of the people who designed them. Standing inside the ancient corridors today, where sunlight enters through openings carved thousands of years ago, it is easy to imagine the movement of people who once lived, worked, and gathered here. But what conversations took place within these walls? What decisions shaped the future of the community that built this extraordinary tower? And what knowledge disappeared when the Nuragic world faded away? Perhaps Santu Antine's greatest mystery is not how it was constructed, but why. The stones reveal patience, organization, and purpose, yet the deepest intentions of their creators remain hidden. And as the ancient tower continues to watch over the Sardinian landscape, it leaves behind a final question. Are we discovering the true story of this monument, or are we only beginning to understand the questions it was built to ask? If Santu Antine reveals how ancient communities transformed stone into symbols of strength and identity, the journey now moves northward across the seas to another landscape where humanity's relationship with stone takes on a different form. Here, beneath the changing skies of Western Ireland, hundreds of massive stones stand across a quiet plain, marking a place where prehistoric people gathered to honor the dead, observe the natural world, and perhaps communicate with forces they believed extended beyond ordinary life. In County Sligo, on the western coast of Ireland, surrounded by rolling hills and the dramatic outline of the Ox Mountains, lies Carrowmore. Spread across a wide-open landscape near the town of Strandhill, this ancient cemetery appears almost gentle and peaceful today. The fields are green, the winds move across the land, and the stones seem to belong naturally to the environment around them. Yet, beneath this calm surface lies one of the oldest and most mysterious concentrations of megalithic monuments in Europe. Carrowmore is a prehistoric burial complex dating back to the Neolithic period, beginning around 3700 BC. It is among the earliest known megalithic cemetery sites in Ireland, and contains the remains of numerous stone monuments built by communities thousands of years before written history reached the island. The people who created Carrowmore left behind no written explanations. They recorded their beliefs not through words, but through stone. The site contains dozens of monuments known as passage tombs, a type of structure found throughout Ireland and parts of Western Europe. These monuments typically consist of a central burial chamber surrounded by large stones, sometimes covered by a mound of earth or stone. At Carrowmore, many of the tombs are relatively low compared with later monuments, but their careful arrangement reveals a society capable of planning, cooperation, and long-term communal effort. The largest and most famous monument associated with the area is Listogil, a central passage tomb surrounded by a ring of smaller structures. Unlike many other tombs at the site, Listogil contains a massive stone cairn, and evidence of a more elaborate design. Why was this location chosen? This question reaches beyond archaeology and into the imagination of the people who built these monuments. The landscape around Carrowmore is not ordinary. The site sits within a natural basin surrounded by mountains, including the distinctive shape of Knocknarea, where another famous prehistoric monument, the Great Cairn of Miosgan Meadba, dominates the summit. Together, these ancient structures create a relationship between landscape and monument that appears carefully considered. Some researchers believe that prehistoric communities selected such locations because they carried spiritual or symbolic importance. Mountains, rivers, and prominent natural features may have been viewed as places where the human world connected with larger forces of nature. Others suggest more practical reasons. The location may have offered visibility, access to resources, and a central gathering place for communities spread across the region. Yet, even the practical explanations leave deeper questions unanswered. Why did Neolithic people dedicate so much energy to monuments for the dead? Why transport enormous stones and arrange them with such care when simpler burial methods were possible? The answer may lie in how these communities understood identity and memory. The tombs at Carrowmore were not merely places where individuals were buried. They appear to have been places where communities returned repeatedly, connecting living generations with those who came before. The dead remained physically present within the landscape, becoming part of the identity of the people who continued to inhabit the region. Archaeological discoveries at Carrowmore have revealed cremated human remains, stone tools, and objects placed within the monuments. These findings suggest that burial rituals involved preparation, ceremony, and symbolic actions. The exact meaning of these practices, however, remains hidden. Did these ceremonies honor ancestors as guides and protectors? Did they represent beliefs about transformation after death? Or were these monuments created to maintain social bonds between different groups? Without written records, each interpretation remains a carefully considered possibility rather than a final answer. The relationship between Carrowmore and astronomy has also attracted attention. Many prehistoric monuments across Ireland show connections with the movement of the sun and changing seasons. Some researchers have examined whether the arrangement of stones at Carrowmore reflects awareness of important points in the solar year. Understanding seasonal cycles would have been essential for agricultural communities, helping them organize planting, harvesting, and ceremonies. However, the exact astronomical purpose of individual monuments remains debated. Some alignments may be intentional, while others may result from the natural arrangement of structures across the landscape. Beyond archaeological research, Carrowmore has inspired more speculative interpretations. Some have suggested that the widespread appearance of megalithic monuments across Europe reflects shared knowledge passed between distant communities. Others have wondered whether these ancient builders possessed a deeper understanding of mathematics, astronomy, or sacred geography than previously recognized. These ideas remain difficult to prove. The archaeological evidence clearly demonstrates impressive organization and symbolic thinking, but the precise beliefs and knowledge systems of the builders remain uncertain. The mystery of Carrowmore also comes from its age. These monuments were created thousands of years before famous civilizations such as ancient Greece and Rome. They belong to a period when communities were beginning to experiment with farming, permanent settlement, and new forms of social organization. The people who built them lived in a world without cities or written records, yet they created structures designed to endure far beyond their own lifetimes. Over the centuries, the landscape changed. Forests grew and disappeared, communities came and went, and new cultures arrived on the island. Many ancient monuments were damaged or forgotten, but Carrowmore continued to survive. Today, visitors walking among the stones encounter a place where the boundary between archaeology and mystery remains remarkably thin. Scientific study can reveal dates, materials, and construction methods, It can identify patterns and provide evidence about the people who created the site, but it cannot fully recover the emotions behind the stones. What did the builders feel as they placed each monument into the landscape? Were they seeking protection, remembrance, connection with ancestors, or an understanding of forces they could not see? Standing among the ancient stones of Carrowmore, beneath the same sky observed by people thousands of years ago, one question remains. Were these monuments created only to honor those who had passed away, or were they also built as messages to the future? Messages that we are still trying to understand. If Carrowmore reveals how ancient communities transformed landscapes into places of memory, ritual, and connection with those who came before, the journey now continues toward the far northern edge of the ancient world. Here, where the Atlantic Ocean meets the rugged shores of the Orkney Islands, another forgotten chapter of human existence emerges from the earth. It is not a palace built for rulers, nor a monument created to display conquest. Instead, it is something much quieter, a village of stone, preserved for thousands of years, offering a rare glimpse into the private lives of prehistoric people. On the western coast of mainland Orkney, Scotland, overlooking the waters of the Bay of Scale, lies Skara Brae. The landscape surrounding the site is dramatic and exposed. Powerful winds sweep across the fields, waves constantly reshape the nearby coastline, and the northern sky stretches endlessly above the remains of one of Europe's most remarkable prehistoric settlements. At first glance, Skara Brae appears almost impossible. Stone walls emerge from the ground, forming the outlines of ancient homes connected by narrow passageways. The settlement seems less like a ruin and more like a place where time suddenly stopped. The rooms, furniture-like stone structures, and carefully arranged spaces create an unusual feeling, the sense that the people who lived here did not simply disappear, but left behind a carefully preserved moment waiting to be understood. Skara Brae dates back to around 3200 BC during the Neolithic period. It existed thousands of years before the construction of many famous ancient monuments, and long before written records described the lives of ordinary people in northern Europe. At a time when many communities were transitioning toward farming and permanent settlement, the inhabitants of Skara Brae created a sophisticated village adapted to one of the harshest environments in Britain. The discovery of the settlement itself is almost as fascinating as the village. For centuries, Skara Brae remained hidden beneath layers of earth and sand. The settlement was exposed in 1850 after a powerful storm struck the coastline and revealed stone structures beneath the surface. What emerged surprised researchers: a prehistoric community with an extraordinary level of preservation. Unlike many ancient sites where only foundations survive, Skara Brae retained details of daily life. Inside the houses, archaeologists discovered stone beds, storage areas, shelves, hearths, and interior arrangements that reveal how people organized their homes. The buildings were connected by covered passageways, allowing residents to move between houses while protected from the severe weather outside. The design reflects careful adaptation. The people of Skara Brae did not build randomly. They understood their environment and created homes that offered warmth, protection, and efficiency. The thick stone walls helped retain heat, while the partly underground construction provided insulation against cold winds. But this practical explanation raises another question. How much planning and cooperation was required to create such a settlement? Building Skara Brae required more than individual effort. Stones had to be selected, transported, shaped, and arranged. A community capable of constructing these homes needed shared knowledge and organization. The village suggests that Neolithic society was far more structured than earlier assumptions once allowed. The settlement also challenges the idea that prehistoric people lived only in simple, temporary shelters. Skara Brae reveals a world where homes were designed around comfort and routine. The repeated layout of the houses suggests that families followed shared traditions. Many dwellings contain similar features, creating the impression of a community where daily life was organized according to common practices. Yet, this similarity creates another mystery. Was Skara Brae a remarkably equal society, where households had similar importance? Or are differences in status simply invisible because they were expressed through objects, relationships, or traditions that left little physical evidence? Archaeologists have found no obvious palace, royal residence, or monument dedicated to a single ruler. There are no signs of powerful individuals controlling the settlement in the way seen in later civilizations. Instead, Skara Brae appears to represent a community built around cooperation and shared survival. But prehistoric societies were rarely simple. Even without kings or large monuments, communities could have contained different forms of influence. Knowledge, age, family connections, and ritual roles may have created social distinctions that archaeology cannot easily detect. The objects discovered at Skara Brae provide another window into this forgotten world. Stone tools, pottery fragments, jewelry, and carved objects reveal skilled craftsmanship and cultural expression. Among the discoveries are mysterious carved stone balls, found at several prehistoric sites across Scotland. Their purpose remains uncertain. Were they tools, symbols of authority, objects connected to games, rituals, or ceremonies? Researchers continue to debate their meaning. Some interpretations suggest they may have represented social identity or symbolic power. Others argue that their function was practical, but has simply been lost over time. The absence of written records means even familiar objects can become puzzles. This is one of the central challenges of studying Skara Brae. The settlement provides extraordinary physical evidence, but it does not provide the voices of the people who created it. We can see where they slept, stored food, and worked, but we cannot directly know what they believed, feared, or hoped for. The relationship between Skara Brae and the surrounding landscape adds another layer of intrigue. The Orkney Islands contain numerous prehistoric monuments, including burial chambers and stone circles, suggesting that the region was an important cultural landscape during the Neolithic period. The nearby monuments of Maeshowe and the Ring of Brodgar reveal that the inhabitants of Orkney were not isolated farmers. They were part of a society that invested enormous effort into creating meaningful places. Why did this landscape become so important? Some researchers believe these monuments reflected beliefs about ancestors, seasons, and the cycles of nature. The placement of certain structures may have been connected with observations of the sun and changing times of the year. Others have suggested that the entire landscape functioned as a sacred environment, where settlements, burial places, and ceremonial structures formed a connected system. More speculative interpretations have also surrounded Skara Brae and the wider Orkney landscape. Some have proposed that prehistoric communities possessed knowledge of astronomy and mathematics far beyond what is usually assumed. Others have imagined connections between distant ancient cultures, suggesting that ideas may have traveled across seas long before recorded history. While ancient people were clearly capable of impressive navigation, trade, and observation, there is limited evidence for more extraordinary claims. The true achievements of Skara Brae's inhabitants are already remarkable. They created a lasting community through adaptation, cooperation, and understanding of their environment. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether these people possessed hidden knowledge, but how they managed to create a stable society in such a challenging place. Life in Orkney was demanding. Resources were limited, winters were harsh, and survival required careful planning. Yet, the inhabitants of Skara Brae created homes that provided comfort and security. They developed traditions that lasted for generations and built a community that remained connected to its landscape. Then, around 2500 BC, the village was abandoned. The reason remains uncertain. There is no clear evidence of a sudden catastrophe. No signs of violent destruction explain the departure of its inhabitants. Instead, the settlement appears to have been gradually left behind. Climate change may have played a role. Shifting weather patterns and environmental changes could have affected agriculture and resources. Social changes may also have influenced migration, as communities adapted to new circumstances. Perhaps the people simply moved elsewhere, carrying their traditions with them. But what did they feel as they left? Did they know they were leaving their homes forever? Did they look back at the stone walls they had built and wonder if future generations would ever find them? Or was the departure simply another step in the continuous movement of human communities across the landscape? Today, Skara Brae remains one of the clearest surviving images of prehistoric domestic life. Its stones preserve evidence of ordinary moments: cooking, sleeping, working, gathering, and living together. In many ways, this is what makes the site so powerful. It does not show humanity at its most powerful or ambitious. It shows humanity being human. The village reminds us that history is not only written through wars, rulers, and monuments. It is also preserved through homes, tools, and the quiet spaces where people built their lives. Standing among the ancient rooms of Skara Brae, with the Atlantic wind moving across the same landscape that surrounded its builders, one final question remains. Are we truly uncovering the lives of the people who lived here, or are we only seeing the small surviving fragments of a much larger story still hidden beneath the earth and the passing of time? If Skara Brae reveals the intimate world of ancient families who built their lives around stone and survival, the journey now turns southward toward the ancient lands of the Levant, where another remarkable structure once stood as a gateway between humanity, mythology, and the divine. Here, among the rolling hills of northern Syria, an extraordinary temple emerged from the earth, a place where enormous footprints carved into stone seemed to suggest the presence of something far greater than ordinary human beings. In the countryside near the modern village of Ain Dara in northern Syria, surrounded by fields and distant mountains, once stood the Ain Dara Temple. Today, the site carries the memory of a monument that was among the most fascinating examples of Iron Age architecture in the region. Though damaged by conflict and time, the remains still reveal a structure that raises profound questions about ancient beliefs, craftsmanship, and the relationship between humans and their gods. Before its destruction, the temple stood on a raised platform overlooking the surrounding landscape. Massive basalt blocks formed its foundations, while carved stone reliefs decorated its walls. The builders created a space that was not simply functional, but deeply symbolic. Every detail appeared intentional, from the placement of sculptures to the arrangement of the entrance and ceremonial areas. Ain Dara was constructed during the Iron Age, most likely between the 10th and 8th centuries BC. It belonged to the cultural world of ancient Syria, a region where different kingdoms, languages, and traditions interacted across centuries. The area was home to powerful civilizations that influenced one another through trade, conflict, and shared ideas. The temple is often associated with the Neo-Hittite kingdoms, successor states that emerged after the collapse of the Hittite Empire. These kingdoms preserved and transformed earlier traditions, creating their own artistic styles and religious practices. Yet Ain Dara remains mysterious because the identity of the deity worshipped there is uncertain. Some researchers have suggested that the temple may have been dedicated to the goddess Ishtar, a major figure in ancient Near Eastern religion associated with love, fertility, war, and power. Others have proposed connections with different divine figures from the region. However, without clear inscriptions identifying the temple's purpose, its exact religious role remains debated. The uncertainty surrounding Ain Dara begins almost immediately upon entering its remains. One of the most famous features of the temple was its enormous carved footprints. Near the entrance, archaeologists discovered large footprints carved into stone slabs. Each footprint measured roughly a meter in length, far larger than any human foot. These carvings created an unforgettable image, as if a giant visitor had stepped toward the sacred interior. But what did these footprints represent? The mainstream interpretation suggests that they were symbolic, not literal. They may have represented the presence of a deity entering the temple. In many ancient traditions, gods were imagined as physically approaching sacred spaces, and symbolic footprints could serve as a reminder that the divine was present even when unseen. The footprints may have marked the transition between ordinary space and sacred space. A person entering the temple would walk past these enormous impressions, moving from the human world into a place associated with divine power. The experience may have been designed to create a feeling of awe, humility, or connection with something beyond everyday existence. Yet, the footprints have also inspired more speculative interpretations. Some have suggested that they represent memories of ancient myths involving giant beings or supernatural visitors. Others have wondered whether they reflect stories of lost traditions that existed before recorded history. These ideas are difficult to verify, and archaeology provides no evidence that actual giants were involved. But the continued fascination with the footprints reveals something important. Ancient symbols often survive long after their original meanings have faded, leaving later generations to search for explanations. Beyond the footprints, the architecture of Ain Dara contains other remarkable details. The temple followed a design similar to other sacred structures found throughout the ancient Near East. It included a large entrance area, a central hall, and an inner sanctuary where religious ceremonies likely took place. The arrangement guided visitors through a carefully controlled experience, gradually moving them deeper into sacred space. The walls were decorated with impressive reliefs depicting lions, sphinx-like creatures, and other symbolic figures. These images were not merely decorative. In ancient societies, animals and mythical creatures often represented protection, strength, and connections between the human world and divine forces. The lion, in particular, held powerful symbolism throughout the Near East. It could represent royal authority, courage, and divine protection. By placing such images on the temple walls, the builders created an environment filled with messages about power and sacred presence. But perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of Ain Dara is its similarity to descriptions of another famous ancient temple, the Temple of Solomon mentioned in biblical traditions. Some researchers have noted architectural similarities between Ain Dara and descriptions of the first temple in Jerusalem, including the use of a tripartite layout with an entrance area, main hall, and inner sanctuary. These comparisons have led to discussions about shared architectural traditions across the ancient Levant. However, similarities do not necessarily prove direct influence. The ancient Near East was a connected world where ideas traveled between kingdoms. Similar designs could emerge because cultures shared religious concepts, construction methods, and artistic traditions. The relationship between Ain Dara and other temples remains an important subject of archaeological discussion. The mystery deepens when considering the knowledge and skill required to create the monument. The builders of Ain Dara worked with enormous stone blocks, carefully carved detailed images, and constructed a temple designed to communicate religious meaning. Their achievement reflects advanced craftsmanship and a sophisticated understanding of architecture. How did ancient builders organize such projects? How many people were involved in transporting and shaping the stones? What ceremonies took place within the temple walls? What did worshippers feel as they entered a space designed to represent the presence of the divine? The answers are difficult to recover. Unlike later civilizations that left extensive written records, many Iron Age societies of the region remain partly understood. Their beliefs survive through fragments. inscriptions, sculptures, buildings, and artistic traditions. These remains reveal patterns, but they cannot fully restore the experiences of the people who created them. Over time, Ain Dara experienced the same fate as many ancient monuments. The temple was eventually abandoned as political powers shifted across the region. New kingdoms rose, old traditions changed, and the sacred space lost its original function. The stones remained, slowly weathering beneath the landscape. For centuries, the site remained largely unknown to the wider world until archaeological investigations began in the late 20th century. Excavations revealed a monument of extraordinary importance, offering new insights into Iron Age religious architecture. But the story of Ain Dara also became a tragedy of the modern era. The temple suffered severe damage during conflict in the region, including an airstrike in 2018 that destroyed significant portions of the surviving structure. Many of the carved stones and architectural details that had survived for thousands of years were lost or damaged. This destruction added another layer to the mystery of Ain Dara. The temple had survived the collapse of kingdoms, changing religions, and centuries of environmental exposure. Yet, in the modern age, a monument that had endured for more than 2,000 years became vulnerable within moments. What was lost was not only stone. It was evidence of a civilization's imagination, craftsmanship, and understanding of the sacred world. Still, the fragments that remain continue to speak. The footprints carved into stone, the images of powerful animals, and the carefully designed spaces all point toward a society that viewed architecture as more than construction. A temple was not simply a building. It was a meeting place between humanity and forces believed to exist beyond ordinary life. Standing among the remains of Ain Dara, it is difficult not to imagine the ancient ceremonies that once filled its halls. The sounds of footsteps approaching the sanctuary, the movement of people carrying offerings, the light entering through the entrance, and the silent presence represented by the enormous stone footprints. What did those ancient worshippers believe they encountered within these walls? Was Ain Dara created only as a place of ritual, or did it preserve a deeper understanding of humanity's relationship with the unseen world? The stones can reveal how the temple was built. They can reveal artistic traditions, construction techniques, and historical connections. But the meaning placed upon those stones by the people who stood before them thousands of years ago remains partially hidden. If Ain Dara reveals how ancient societies transformed stone into sacred spaces, where humans sought connection with unseen forces, the journey now moves toward the highlands of the South Caucasus, where another forgotten city rests beside the waters of a distant lake. Here, on a landscape shaped by mountains, volcanic stone, and shifting empires, an ancient settlement preserves traces of a civilization that mastered warfare, craftsmanship, and monumental construction while leaving behind questions about its beliefs, its rituals, and the mysteries hidden beneath its ruins. In the eastern part of modern Armenia, overlooking the shores of Lake Van, lies the Vanni archaeological site. Rising from a landscape surrounded by mountains and open plains, the remains of this ancient city reveal the story of the kingdom of Urartu, one of the most powerful civilizations of the ancient Near East during the first millennium BC. Today, the site appears quiet. Broken stones, weathered walls, and scattered foundations mark the location where a once important center of political and religious life stood. But thousands of years ago, this was a place of power, a city connected to kings, armies, temples, and a culture that challenged some of the greatest empires of its time. The ancient city associated with the Vanni archaeological remains was known as Tushpa, the capital of the kingdom of Urartu. From the 9th to the 6th centuries BC, Urartu controlled a large territory across parts of present-day eastern Turkey, Armenia, and surrounding regions. Positioned between major powers such as Assyria and the kingdoms of the Iranian plateau, Urartu developed into a sophisticated state with advanced engineering, military organization, and artistic traditions. The location of Tushpa was not chosen by accident. The city was built around a massive natural fortress overlooking Lake Van. The towering cliffs provided natural protection, while the surrounding landscape offered access to valuable resources. From this elevated position, rulers could observe the territory below and demonstrate their authority over the region. But the true complexity of Vanni becomes visible when examining what lies beyond its defensive walls. The Urartians were skilled builders. They constructed enormous stone fortifications, carefully designed temples, royal residences, irrigation systems, and administrative buildings. Their achievements demonstrate a level of organization that required centralized leadership and specialized knowledge. One of the most remarkable aspects of Urartian civilization was its relationship with water. The region around Lake Van could be challenging for agriculture, yet the Urartians developed advanced irrigation techniques that transformed dry areas into productive farmland. They built canals, reservoirs, and water systems that supported cities and agricultural communities. Some of these achievements were so impressive that parts of the ancient landscape still preserve traces of their engineering. How did a society living thousands of years ago develop such sophisticated systems? The answer lies in generations of accumulated knowledge. The Urartians understood their environment and adapted to it, creating solutions that allowed their civilization to flourish in a demanding landscape. Yet, the archaeological remains of Vanni also reveal a more mysterious side of Urartian culture. Religion was central to their society. The Urartians worshipped a group of powerful deities, with the god Haldi holding a particularly important position. Temples dedicated to these divine figures were places where kings performed rituals, offered sacrifices, and connected political authority with religious power. The remains of temples and inscriptions discovered at Urartian sites provide valuable information about their beliefs. However, many aspects of their spiritual world remain difficult to fully understand. What did the Urartians believe happened beyond death? How did they view the relationship between humans, gods, and the natural world? The inscriptions tell us the names of rulers and deities, but they do not reveal the emotions behind the rituals. They record actions, victories, and offerings, but the personal experiences of those who entered these sacred spaces remain hidden. Among the most fascinating discoveries at Vanni are examples of Urartian craftsmanship. The civilization produced intricate metal objects, weapons, jewelry, and decorative items that demonstrate exceptional artistic skill. Bronze and iron were shaped into objects that were both practical and symbolic, often decorated with images of animals, warriors, and divine figures. These artifacts reveal a society where art and power were deeply connected. A weapon was not only a tool of war, it could represent authority, status, and divine protection. A piece of jewelry was not merely decoration. It could communicate identity, wealth, and connection to a particular social group. The city also raises questions about the relationship between Urartu and neighboring civilizations. For much of its history, Urartu existed in competition with Assyria, one of the most powerful empires of the ancient world. Assyrian records describe conflicts between the two powers, portraying Urartu as a serious rival. These accounts provide valuable information, but they also reflect the perspective of an opposing civilization. How did the Urartians view themselves? Were they defenders of their homeland, builders of a unique culture, or participants in a larger struggle for control of the ancient Near East? The archaeological evidence suggests that Urartu was far more than a military opponent. It was a civilization with its own identity, artistic traditions, and political ambitions. Yet, like many ancient powers, Urartu eventually disappeared. By the 6th century BC, the kingdom declined. The reasons remain debated. External invasions, internal instability, changing political alliances, and the rise of new powers may have contributed to its collapse. Unlike some civilizations that vanish through a single dramatic event, Urartu appears to have faded through a gradual transformation. The cities were abandoned or changed. Political structures disappeared. New cultures emerged across the region. But the stones remained. Over centuries, the remains of Vani continued to preserve fragments of a world that had once seemed permanent. Fortifications that protected kings, temples where rituals took place, and objects created by skilled craftsmen all survived as silent witnesses. The rediscovery and study of Urartian sites changed how historians understood the ancient Caucasus and Near East. Before, archaeological research revealed the scale of Urartu's achievements. The civilization was often overshadowed by better-known empires such as Assyria and Persia. Yet, the remains at Vani demonstrate that history contains many forgotten powers, civilizations that shaped their world even if later generations nearly erased their memory. The mystery of Vani is not only about what happened to Urartu, it is also about how much knowledge can disappear. A civilization can build cities, create art, develop technology, and influence entire regions, yet still become a forgotten name buried beneath the landscape. Some more speculative interpretations of Urartian sites have suggested hidden knowledge, unknown technologies, or forgotten connections with other ancient cultures. These ideas reflect the fascination inspired by the ruins, but the strongest evidence remains grounded in archaeology, the engineering, inscriptions, architecture, and artifacts that reveal a highly organized society. Still, even the most careful archaeological explanations leave room for wonder. The ancient builders of Vani lived in a world where mountains, water, storms, and celestial movements shaped daily existence. Their cities were not simply collections of stone. They were expressions of how they understood power, survival, and their place within the universe. Standing among the remains overlooking Lake Van, it is possible to imagine the ancient city when it was alive. The sounds of workers building walls, the movement of soldiers along the fortress paths, the ceremonies performed within temples, the voices of people whose names have disappeared but whose creations remain. What thoughts passed through the minds of those who looked across the same lake thousands of years ago? Did the rulers of Urartu believe their kingdom would last forever? Did the builders understand that their stones would outlive their language, their traditions, and their memories? Today, Vani continues to reveal new fragments of the past, but many questions remain unanswered. The ruins show the achievements of a remarkable civilization, yet they also remind us how incomplete our understanding of ancient humanity truly is. Perhaps beneath the remaining stones, beneath the layers of earth and forgotten centuries, more clues are still waiting to be discovered. Clues that may finally reveal not only how the people of Urartu built their world, but what they believed their place within that world truly meant.